UFOs, ghosts, spiritual and paranormal. From all of the three moons, beyond your wildest dreams. Dead Tony. Nice.
TruthSeekah and or its affiliates are not responsible for any strange phenomena that may occur during or after listening to this podcast, which may include the following: heightened senses of awareness, psychic abilities, UFO sightings, alien contact, time loss, out-of-body experiences, ringing in the ears, ESP, lucid dreaming, increased synchronicities, astral projection, telepathy, stronger intuition, levitation, miraculous healings, and or remote viewing. Please be advised to listen at your own discretion.
Won't you come and take me away? I just wanna be with you. Won't you come and take me away? To a place to walk on troubled seas, faith to stand when I don't believe. I just wanna be with you. Won't you come and take me away? I just wanna be with you. Won't you come?
You are now locked into the TruthSeekah podcast.
Gargoyles! Psychics! Everything's ungodly! Dark savage!
Streaming live at TruthSeekah.com.
She's not a Christian!
Give it up, y'all.
Your portal to the paranormal, esoteric, and all things spiritual.
She's tampering in dark-sided stuff!
And now, your host, TruthSeekah.
Yo, what's up, guys? How's it going? I'm TruthSeekah. This is the TruthSeekah podcast, man. I'm excited, delighted, as always, to be with you guys for another live stream here with the TruthSeekah podcast. It's going to be a good one. Really good. Been looking forward to this, the day that we booked it. This is a listener request episode. I've been having several of my listeners here and patrons reach out to me and request today's guest. So really dove into his work, found so many similarities to, what I'm doing and things that I've been through that I'm trying to get some more clarity on to help people walk in victory. We're going to be talking about demons. We're going to be talking about the demonic. We're going to be talking about hearing voices, schizophrenia. Listen, we got to talk about it because the pharmaceutical industry wants to talk to you about it as well. So we want to make sure that we talk to you and try to get you some clarity, maybe get you some healing, and find out a way to walk in victory. And I'm going to talk about the ways I walked in victory because I dealt with all of this stuff. I'm a victim of this stuff, man. So I'm talking to all the other people who have overcame and all of the people out there who are going through it right now. I know that there is hope. I found it in my life, and all of my work is to bring about that healing. So today's going to be a good episode. If you guys have any questions or comments, make sure you post them in the chat. If you're listening on Facebook, YouTube, Periscope, no matter where you are, Twitch, DLive, post those questions. I see them all, and I'll try to ask the guests today any of those questions that you have. Also, I want to say a huge thank you to everybody supporting my work via Patreon. This is a listener-supported, listener-funded show. Does not exist without your help. So thank you, every single one of you, from the bottom of my heart for co-creating with me, bringing this to the table. You guys share in the benefits and the harvest from this. Anything good that comes from this, you guys share in that. And I want you to know that it means the world to me that you believe in my work. I want to give a shout out to some of the latest patrons within the last week or so. Shout out to Elizabeth Thornset. Thank you, my friend, for coming on. My friend Cache Milan is back, man. We go back several years, man. Thank you for coming back on as well as a patron. Darren, I don't know how to say your last name, man. I always butcher it. I'm sorry. Iridry. I know I messed it up. And shout out to Hayden Robert Hughes for coming on. You guys get access to all of my music, 200 plus songs. There's unreleased music, access to the Thursday night School of the Mystics and the prayer sessions that we're doing as well, the meditations, the hangouts, all that stuff, as well as the Discord servers. If you want to support, head on over to patreon.com/TruthSeekah. You get access there. For those of you who have not had a chance to get it, my book is here. It's doing great. Thank you guys for all the support. But my book, Spirit Realm, Angels, Demons, Spirits, and the Sovereignty of God, forward by Jordan Maxwell, is available for you guys who have not had a chance to get it. Also, it is on Audible. If you go down to the link of this video, this podcast audio, wherever you're listening, there's a link to get it for free. If you click my Audible trial link, I read the whole thing, put it on Audible. It's like 4.5 hours. It's not that long. Check it out. Some really good information in there, and you can get it for free. So why not? Another update. We got our December retreat coming up. We have 2 at the time of this, the 29th of September, we have 2 female tickets left. We're doing our co-ed retreat. There's 2 female tickets and there are 5 male tickets left. If anybody who wants to get with us, Mobile, Alabama, we're headed to the woods for the Reset, Refresh, and Renew co-ed retreat that we got going on. The first 3 that we've done have been beautiful, and definitely looking forward to connecting with you beautiful people for this next one in December. The weather's going to be amazing. Go to TruthSeekah.com for more info on that. The Path of the Healer course program starts in a couple weeks. And so if anybody wants to learn one-on-one with me for an 8-week small program, and it's the Path of the Healer, all that info is on the website. You can go check it out for yourself. And we're going to go ahead and jump into today's discussion. My friend, welcome to the podcast, Jerry Marzinsky, brother. How are you?
Good. Glad to be here. Appreciate you inviting me.
Is today your birthday?
It is.
Happy birthday, man. Thank you for spending it with me in the audience, man.
That's great to spend it this way. This is a good way to do it.
I heard that. Doing what you love, right?
Well, getting out some important information that the mainstream is never going to cover.
Yeah, for sure. I'm kind of new to your work. But you know what I'm saying? You're not new to this. For those of you for those who are listening who have no idea who you are, what you bring to the table, I guess let's just do a quick intro about who you are and your work. We'll start there. Quick intro.
Well, I was a licensed psychotherapist. After graduate school, I began working the biggest psychiatric hospital on the planet at the time, Central State Hospital in Central Georgia. It had, I think, about 12,000 patients at the time. It was the size of a small town. I remember when I first got there is walking through the streets at night and hearing these screams of the mentally ill just echo into the night. Remember one lady came to the window, a patient at night, and she was staring down at me and I was staring up at her. And I'm like, what is going on in her mind? I spent 7 years working there, went back to graduate school again. And when I finished with that, moved to Arizona, where I went to work at a county hospital in the emergency room doing psych crisis. From there, worked 2 years in a mental health center, then went and got a job at the state prison in the psychology department and worked there for, I think, about 17, 18 years. After I retired from there, I went to work with virtually every big hospital in Tucson in the emergency room doing psych crisis. The police would drag in these people that were just totally out of control and insane, and we'd have to determine what to do with them, admit them, release them, or get them out of the emergency room. Yeah. Basically, that's what they were most interested in, is clear that emergency room. The doctors didn't like dealing with sick people. They didn't understand them. They didn't know what to do with them, so they just turned them over to us. The entire time I was studying the voices. That started out at Central State, where after graduate school, I'd been programmed to believe, like everybody else, that schizophrenia was due to a chemical imbalance in the patient's brain, and that the voices were hallucinations. But when I hit the front lines and watched, I never saw a psychiatrist ever give any kind of lab test or any other kind of test to determine what chemicals in the patient's brain were out of order or imbalanced. And I found that quite odd. They would just go into their bag of, powerful psychiatric meds, which were mainly major tranquilizers. And they would just start drugging these people. They'd take a guess. It was like a shotgun approach. And that didn't add up with what I was taught. So it's like, okay, if they don't give any kind of test to determine what is out of balance and by how much, how do they know what they're even treating? And I did some research into that and found that no such tests existed. It was a scam that was perpetuated on the public by one of the drug companies, the big pharma companies, when Prozac came out. And they knew it was not true at the time, the chemical imbalance theory, but it sold drugs. So they kept it. And Big Pharma has an enormous amount of influence over academia and psychiatry. And they just fostered this deception. And they're still teaching it today, even though it's been strongly disproven. So when I ruled out the chemical imbalance as a cause for what these people were doing. The schizophrenics at the state hospital, they were the worst. I worked at a psychiatric rehabilitation center, the Yarborough Center at the time. And our job was to pick the highest functioning mentally ill out of the entire hospital and try to rehabilitate them. So it wasn't just stabilizing them, it was stabilizing them and then putting them to work, which is a big difference from just drugging them or giving them a chemical lobotomy and then turning them loose. These people were required to function for us to have a successful closure. And they almost all of them went off their meds at one time or another. So I thought that odd. Why would they choose insanity over the meds? Now, and I started asking them, one after another, and the response I got was the side effects. And the side effects are awful. I mean, they're absolutely awful. Tremors, it's like a chemical lobotomy. Yeah. But psychosis is much, much worse. They're both bad, but being psychotic and out of control, you've been there for periods of time, in your past, you know what it's like. It's no fun. So I'd ask them, why? They'd say, okay, side effects. So then I started experimenting with that. I'd give them a blank sheet of paper and I'd say, okay, write down all the side effects you've had from your medications. And they didn't all have the same side effects. So there'd be a handful, 5 or 6. And then I had another questionnaire with all the symptoms of paranoid schizophrenia, 2 pages. And I'd hand them that. And I said, okay, write down all the symptoms you've had when you went off your meds. And they would circle them all. And they were all much worse. And then I'd hand them the 2 sheets back and I said, okay, which one is worse? And they would consistently say being psychotic was worse than the side effect of those meds. So then I'd ask them, okay, then why do you go off your meds? Guess what the answer was? Any idea?
I don't know.
That's exactly right. They all said, I don't know.
Huh.
And this was over the period of years.
Yeah.
And I felt like, a crazy guy myself, asking them the same question over and over and over again and getting the same answer and expecting a different answer. And scores of them, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. And I'm thinking, if you don't know, who does? You have to know.
Yeah, because you're not doing it.
Yeah. Where else am I going to get this answer? You have to know. You have to have that answer somewhere in there. So toward the end of the 7 years I was working at the state hospital, there was one gal who went off her meds 3 times. And that was like 3 strikes, you're out. If they're not going to stay on their meds, back in the 70s, there was no other treatment that the establishment knew it.
Now, whenever they get off their meds, they usually have an episode, and that's how you can tell, right? They usually have some type of episode.
Yes, it takes some time, sometimes a week, 2 weeks, sometimes a month, but eventually the voices come back. You know, so these meds are not curing anything. They're basically subduing symptoms. So they're actually, what they're actually doing is tranquilizing the patient. And the voices have a harder time when the patient is calm. So this gal, we were about to discharge her from the rehab center because she wouldn't stay on the meds. And her mother called me and said, "You can't do that. I can't handle her. She's turned my life into a nightmare. Please let me come up and let's talk to her and see if we can't reason with her." And I said, "Well, okay, you know, what do I got to lose?" So she drove up from South Georgia one Friday afternoon, and we all went into my office, closed the door. And the mother and I are both asking this gal, why? Why do you continue to go off your meds? And this is after asking them scores of times, other patients, why they went off their meds. And the only response I got was the side effects. Ruled that out. So we're both in there kind of begging, why do you go off the meds? Because she had a lot of potential. She was doing good in her classes when she stayed on the meds. She was pleasant when she stayed on the meds. She got off the meds and she just fell apart. So both her mother and I are imploring her, why do you go off your meds? She goes, well, you know, I can tell you, but you won't believe it. So try me. I've heard a lot of strange things while I've been working here. I don't think you're going to tell me anything that's going to surprise me. And she said, the voices told me that I was being poisoned. You know? And right away, click. That answered several other questions, because when I first got there, I noticed that psychiatrists were being assaulted at a rate far in excess of any other staff at the hospital. You know, far in excess of psych nurses or counselors or psychologists or anybody else. They were being assaulted by schizophrenic patients at a very high rate. And, you know, the statistics bore that out. It was a rate that was equal to the assaults on attendants who were around schizophrenic patients 24 hours a day. So, and they didn't spend that much time with the patients. So I'm thinking, what are they doing in 20 minutes that they see this patient once a month, that they're pissing them off so bad that they're getting beat up? Like, what are they doing? What could they possibly say to these people that are setting them off at this kind of rate? Well, that answered it, because I'd heard before from several patients that the meds were poison. You know, that the side effects were the effects of being poisoned. And it turned out that that's what was happening with this gal. She said that her voices were telling her that the psychiatrist was poisoning her, and they were pointing to the side effects of the meds as proof that she was being poisoned. You know, and click, that answered the assault rate that I was wondering about for years. And so it's kind of like, okay, you know, I kind of suspected the voices were behind this because they came out in other ways. I started seeing that they ran specific patterns. And one of those patterns was that they noticed that when these patients attempted to read the Bible, the voices got louder. They did not like that. And I went, that's odd for a hallucination. You know, why would a hallucination react negatively to the Bible? And then I had one patient come in and tell me that the 23rd Psalm, when they repeated that, it was akin to throwing worms on a hot frying pan. That's how these voices reacted. And I'm going, well, why would a hallucination do that? And that was consistent. So I started handing out the 23rd Psalm, even at the state hospital. And the reaction was consistent. The voices reacted very negatively to the 23rd Psalm. And I'm like looking into this. I'm like, what research exists that shows that these voices are hallucinations? There was none. Psychiatry just made that up. It's being taught in all the academic institutions. It's being taught in graduate school. It's being taught in psychology, but there is nothing to back it. So it's, then some other patterns also started emerging. I saw that these voices that these people were hearing were consistently negative. There was never anything positive, and if it was positive, it was used later to turn around and get these patients. And the voices were always upsetting. They were always negative. They were always derogatory. They were telling these patients to kill themselves, and a number of them did. And what I saw was that when psychiatry found out that the voices were telling the patient to commit suicide, they jumped. I mean, that was reality to them. It was all of a sudden the voices became real, and they became a real threat. And they would lock these people down on suicide watch. They'd drug them silly, and they'd keep them in that state until they admitted or agreed that they would no longer kill themselves or they weren't a danger to each other. But that was the only aspect of the voices they reacted to. They had no curiosity about what else these voices were saying, what other effect they had on the patient. They just wrote all that off. They weren't even curious about it. They didn't ask them. So I started suspecting that it was the voices that drove these people to do some of the bizarre stuff that they did. Patients cut themselves. I mean, the suicide rate in the state hospital was enormous. Their graveyard was over 30,000 patients. This hospital dated back to before the Civil War. Right now, they've closed it down, but it's one of the most haunted places on the planet. So here was a very set, unswerving pattern that had developed as I started questioning patients about what these voices were telling them. And they didn't want to talk about the voices. And there was really no benefit in them for doing that. Because, in the past, their typical histories, they'd tell their friends they were hearing voices, and their friends would get freaked out. Like, oh, something's wrong with this person. I mean, they're hearing these. I don't hear them. Nobody else hears them. They're bad. They're possessed. And they would start losing their friends. Their friends would start backing away. If they told the boss that was it, they probably didn't last very long after that. So the only people they had left were their parents. So they tell their parents, and by then the voices were causing a lot of trouble in the family. They don't like families. They don't like babies. They don't like psychiatrists. They don't like psychologists, and they especially don't like preachers or churches. So when I found out the voices reacted negatively to these people going to church, because a lot of them figured out, okay, this is something bad. I need to go to church and turn myself around. I found that I started questioning patients about their experience with going to church. And I found that it broke down into 3 different classes, which I found interesting. And these were consistent, is if the voices weren't very strong, they would do everything they could to convince the person not to go to church, before they got there. Hey, you got this to do, you got that to do, you're wasting your time, or whatever. But once they walked into the church, those voices disappeared. Those were the weak ones. If the voices were moderately strong, they do everything they could to convince the person not to go to church, offer all kinds of distractions. But when they got there and the preacher started talking, they would overtalk the preacher and get louder and try to blot out everything that preacher was trying to say. So they had to struggle to hear what the pastor was saying. And if they were very strong, the voices would just drive them out. They'd jump up and they would run out of that church. Oh, yeah. And after they left, then there would be some relief.
Wow.
And that was consistent. So I'm like, again, going, why would a hallucination, hallucinations are random. They're positive, they're negative, they're neutral, they're all over the place. There's no pattern to them. but the voices were starting to show very distinct patterns. And if they're a pattern, they're not a hallucination. They're showing predictable patterns. And then I noticed that when the preacher for the hospital would have a social gathering downstairs in the rehab center, that the schizophrenics didn't want to go. All the other patients went, but the schizophrenic patients stayed in bed on the dim ward, sitting there staring at the ceiling or reading. And then I would do rounds and see what they were doing and notice the stuff they were reading was negative. It was horror books, war books, murder mysteries, all kinds of negative stuff. You never found anything positive on their bedstands. And I went, that's odd. Wonder what's going on there. But I asked them, well, why don't you go down and get some ice cream and cake? I mean, that was hard to come by at the state hospital.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, well, I don't want to be around people. I don't want to listen to preachers. I don't believe in God. I don't believe in Jesus. It's a bunch of bull. So I began to strongly suspect that the voices had something to do with their behavior. There was one patient I remember who, in another psychiatric unit, he cut off his penis.
Yeah.
And that was, back then they didn't have any cell phones. It was the grapevine where we got news, and that grapevine centered around the hospital cafeteria. So all the news would be transferred there from all the different units. The psychiatrist on this unit got beat up, one over there got beat up, strange cases like this guy. And what they did is they sewed it back on, and it was the hospital. It was for weeks it went off. The grapevine was talking about whether the penis took or not.
Yeah.
And this happened on a psychiatric unit where my friend worked, and we had dinner together often. So I asked him, I said, Ed, how about going and looking up that patient, asking why he did that? And the next day he came back and he said, what'd you ask him? And he goes, yeah, I asked him. I said, well, what'd he say? He said he didn't need it. And I went, okay. And there was all these destructive behaviors that was carried on by schizophrenics. And another thing I noticed is that they would start sabotaging themselves as they got close to finishing their vocational classes that we put them into. They would go off their meds and be thrown out, or they would just stop studying, or they would stop attending classes. It was almost like they couldn't stand to succeed.
Wow.
And that was a pattern also. So the more I saw that, the more I started asking them about their voices. And again, back to all the reasons they have for not talking about their voices. Their parents, when they told their parents, they would take them to a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist would say, well, you're mentally ill. You have a chemical brain imbalance in your brain. You have to take these meds to fix it. It's a lifelong sentence. You have to take these for the rest of your life. There is no cure, and you have to come see me, once a month. So here's this enormous bill for psych meds, $100, $150 for a psychiatrist appointment where he sees the person for half an hour maybe. Well, how's your meds doing? They're not doing good, they'll change them. Or too strong, they'll change them to something else. So what they do is they just switch the medicines around. In the institutions, all the major institutions, they're just drug pushers. They just, and what I noticed at the state hospital too was the drug representatives would show up and they'd give free lunches, free dinners, just come and listen to the latest story about our newest drug. And all the psychiatrists would show up. They'd present all these graphs and stuff like that. And, I'd ask them, what proof do you have that there's a chemical brain imbalance? And all they could list were correlations. It's just correlations. There was no objective proof. Yeah. But their medications did work. I mean, some cases where, they were just raving mad and they take these meds and then they become normal again. So, I'm like, okay, what's going on? And I started asking patients, questions. I pull them in and, what are the voices telling you? How do they act? And I noticed that some of them got upset when I asked those questions. They didn't like answering them. They didn't like talking about the voices. I didn't understand exactly why. But I kept questioning them. And when I noticed that they started getting upset, I'd back off. But in one or two cases, not soon enough. And they went to the psychiatrist and they said, this guy's bothering me with asking me questions about my voices. And the psychiatrist got upset and I got ordered into his office and I'm on the red carpet and he's there, this patient told me that you were asking him about his hallucinations and he's upset about it. I don't need you upsetting my patients. I have enough trouble without, people asking about hallucinations. These are hallucinations. They're unreal. And all you're doing by asking them questions is reinforcing. You're making the patient worse. And I want you to stop right away. So there were two such instances that happened while I was working at the state hospital over those 7 years, where psychiatrists ordered me to stop asking questions about the voices to the patients. So I had to function below their radar. And it was really hard to get them to talk about them, because in most cases, if they started talking to a staff member about their voices and what the voices were saying, they'd get referred to the psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist would jack up their medications. And that's the last thing they wanted, because it's like a chemical lobotomy. The side effects, I can list them all, but they're awful. So they really didn't want more meds than they needed. But it was clear that the medications did work. They weakened the voices. Very seldom did they ever completely get rid of them, but they weakened them. So it was not a cure. It was basically an ongoing treatment and a life sentence. So they were told they would have to take these awful psychiatric drugs for the rest of their lives. And the cost was enormous for a person who doesn't have insurance. So going forward a little bit, here in Tucson, I'm 60 miles north of the Mexican border. For a patient to stay sane here in the US, they're facing $100, $150 psychiatric visit to prescribe these awful meds that are not abusable, that nobody wants to take. So I don't even know why they have them under prescription. Nobody wants these drugs. Nobody wants to take these. Mm-hmm. They're not abusable. They're awful drugs, but they control them. Right? So you have to go there. You have to get the prescription. You have to go to the pharmacy, and then you're facing the pharmacy bill, which is some $750 a month for any psychotic drugs. So you're talking a bill of close to $1,000 a month to stay sane in the United States. You cross the border over to Mexico, you can get these same drugs made by the same companies over the counter for $75, and you don't need a psychiatric appointment. You don't have to go back. So if you know these work for you and you want to take them, you just go get them. So look at the discrepancy. Look at how the medical mafia, psychiatric mafia, has control of these things. And you got to pay through the nose to stay sane. And unfortunately, it's the people who can least afford these that are hit by this. And we're all paying the cost, because a lot of these people who end up being taken to emergency rooms or private psychiatric hospitals or even state hospitals, they can't pay for these drugs. So Big Pharma, the psychiatric mafia, is raking in a fortune that we're all paying for. And medical costs in the United States are just out of control. That's one of the reasons. Big Pharma has bought off 2/3 of the Senate and 2/3 of the Congress to pass laws that benefit them and their profit margin. And we're all paying for it. So I saw that the meds didn't work to cure anything. If they went off the meds, the voices eventually came back. So the question was, okay, if it's not a chemical imbalance that is causing insanity, then what is it? And the more evidence I got, the more it pointed to the voices. But I couldn't really do a good study at the state hospital because the kind of underlying unwritten rule at the state hospital was you don't do anything to upset psychotic patients that you don't have to. I mean, if you have to bring them under control, you have to, but otherwise you do nothing to upset them. And that made sense in terms of psychiatrists always getting beat up. They didn't want them upset. And you never knew how they're going to react once they're upset. I mean, some of them have a slow burning fuse. Some of them go off like an explosion. So you never knew. But that didn't stop me from asking questions about the voices. And I would get piece by piece by piece, little pieces of what the voices were telling these people. And with each piece, what I would do when a new patient came on and I started asking them about the voices, they were very leery. Okay, so when I started off, if they felt that I believed that the voices were just unreal hallucinations, they just shut me off. They'd be boom, conversation over. I don't want to talk to you. You've got nothing, So I decided to give them the benefit of the doubt, and they would tell me a little more. And each little piece I learned about the voices, every new patient that came in, I'd say, well, tell me about the voices. This is what I know so far. And I would give them what little information I had, and that changed their whole attitude. They're going, well, this guy's not like the other ones. I mean, he's at least got an open mind, and they would tell me a little bit more. And that built and built and built until, after 7 years, and this gal telling her that the voices were telling her not to take her medications, I strongly suspected that the bizarre behavior of psychotic patients was due to the voices, but I didn't want to believe it. I absolutely didn't want to believe it. I didn't believe in, I didn't want to believe they were demons. I didn't want to believe that these were separate entities. I kept thinking that this is something gone wrong with their subconscious mind, or this is, the way they were treated, or I just didn't want to believe it. I kind of stonewalled it.
Were you religious at all when you were going through all this in the early days?
Not really. I was kind of, I knew there was God. I knew there was Jesus. I went to different churches, but I wasn't, a Bible thumper. It wasn't like I was agnostic. I knew there was a God. I knew Jesus was around. I went to church periodically. I didn't pray a lot, but I was coming at it from the other direction as this evidence appeared before me.
Yeah.
So when I started hearing some of the responses to patients reading the Bible, there was one who told me when he started reading the Bible, the voices came and said, why are you wasting your time there? Jesus couldn't even save himself. What makes you think he's going to save you?
Yeah.
And I've heard that a couple of times.
Real cynical.
Yeah. Like you're wasting your time. But this is. So I'm like going, what are these things? I suspected they weren't hallucinations. I didn't really know what they were. I suspected they were driving all this, but I really wasn't free to question these patients without getting into trouble. So here I'm starting to see these patterns. They started closing down the state hospital with Proposition 13 that started in California. It was basically a tax revolt. So the mental health authorities are going, well, it's not good to keep these people locked up in a hospital. We're going to set up a series of mental health centers. and they're going to be treated from there. And I'm going, they won't even take their medications now that they're being handed to them on a silver platter, and the staff are watching them taking. What makes these people think they're going to go out of their way to go to a mental health center when they probably don't have transportation, and go through all the trouble to see a psychiatrist there when they won't even take them now where they're being handed? You know, like, this is a crazy idea. And on top of that, they didn't have enough mental health centers. So, you know, they created more mental health centers, and then they slowly withdrew the funding from them. And these people ended up on the streets. They ended up in the revolving door of the mental health center where they
homeless people. Yeah, for sure.
Homeless people.
I did a video. We did this day. We raised some money just to find a random homeless guy. We was going to bless him, take him shopping, spend a couple $100 just on a random homeless person. And we picked him up, and he's in a truck riding next to me. I got a friend of mine in the back seat, but this guy, he picking up, we'll talk to him. And then I'm driving and I'm looking at him, and he's talking under his breath. And he's doing this, and he's pointing at me while I'm driving. I'm like, oh Lord. Didn't know this was going to happen. Like, it got weird. I was like, okay. And once we finally got to Walmart, we took him around. He was talking to, I'm in Walmart walking around. He was stuttering and he would talk to himself. But it was weird because when I would talk to him, he immediately would answer. Like, he was having this conversation and he was speaking it. But when we'd ask him a conversation, hey man, you want something? Oh yeah, sure. Let's get that. Yeah, that's fine. That's good. And then he'd walk off and he'd start talking to himself. And it's like, he's in dialogue with someone, healthy dialogue. Like, we all have this inner dialogue with ourselves. It's natural. Like, where does it become demonic? A lot of people are talking about like having a split in your consciousness where it gets a mind of its own. It has a name. It talks back. It tells you to do things you don't want to do. You know what I'm saying? When do we know that we got something going on? Because we all have the inner dialogue, but there's something happens, something shifts with it, and it starts doing things that are getting you in trouble. It's, you know, there would be some people who said that they would listen to those voices in their head, and it benefits them. It helps them. Like Socrates talks about having this oracle that he communed with, and it criticized him like his conscience or something, right? And it told him what he should and shouldn't be doing and things like that. What's the difference there? Because we all have the inner dialogue. People joke around and say it's okay to talk to yourself. You just don't answer yourself. You know, you can ask yourself questions and have the inner dialogue, but when it starts talking back, then you're in trouble. How does one know that, you know, that they're dealing with something that's unhealthy? Is it because of the fruit of it? Like, it's causing them to do self-inflicting things? If it's running off, you know, friends, it's self-sabotage? Because everything that you've been talking about, we know people, even in mild situations, that are like self-sabotaging or running good friends out of their life or running pastors out of, you know, that kind of thing. When do we know that it's something that's demonic and a split personality versus I'm just a real analytical, you know, self-introspective person who communicates with myself all the time?
Well, the reality in this situation is that they get us all. Yeah, that it's a normal curve. It's everybody gets hit, but it's most noticeable with schizophrenics. I mean, that's where it's glaring.
Now, do these voices make the person schizophrenic, or would they be clinically schizophrenic and then the demons kind of find this like bed to sleep in almost?
Well, at some level, they have to invite these entities in. And one of the major ways that I've seen that they do that, especially with working with prisoners in the psych department in the prisons, was meth.
Meth, yeah.
Meth just does something to their spiritual field that just opens them up to these things.
And you can tell, you can look at a person when they're on meth and tell just by their body movements and the way they move their eyes, the way they move their head, their animations are different. Like, you can definitely tell that they have a different persona even about them.
Yeah, and that's not them that you're seeing. So one thing people have to realize is that not all their thoughts are theirs. You know, and where do thoughts come from? You know, the Christian mystic Sweden, Manuel Swedenborg, answered that some 700 years ago. And it's kind of like, the cartoons. You have two demonic or evil spirits putting thoughts in your head, and you have two guardian angel types that very seldom speak other than through feeling and intuition. Okay, and these are constantly at battle. Mm-hmm. So the average person who gets hit, the way they experience it is they're just minding their own business, walking around, and all of a sudden this horrific thought barges into their head to do something that they would never do, or say something they would never say, that doesn't fit in with their personality. And, it just horrifies them. The last one I had that I really remember is I have a beautiful, pure white husky that's part wolf. And because she's part wolf, she gets into some trouble sometimes, which is annoying. But she wasn't in trouble this day. Here in Tucson, instead of mowing lawns, we take a machete and cut cactus, keep it down. So I was out in the backyard with the machete, cutting cactus, and here the dog runs by, and here's this thought that just barges into my head. It goes, cut her head off. And I'm like, what? It was like horrifying and upsetting, and I'd never do that. And it was upsetting that I even had that thought. So that's an instance where they come in and they inject a thought into your mind, okay? And it's upsetting thought. Now, one thing I noticed back in the hospital days, and especially when I was working in the prison, was that after the voices attack, the person is totally drained of energy. And that was consistent. So eventually the pattern was that every time they attack, the person is drained. So where does that energy go? And it's a one-to-one correlation. And if you would ask them what happened to your energy, they would say, I don't know. But back to your question of how do you know when you're being hit with a demonic thought? Well, virtually every negative thought you have is sent by the dark side. Every single negative thought you have about yourself or anybody else is put there by the dark side. Now, what they feed off is the negative emotional. They come, and I don't know how they do it, but they will suck that energy off, and they will leave that person eviscerated energetically. I mean, I've had prisoners tell me that before an office appointment, the voices hit them and they drained them so bad they couldn't even get out of bed. And this was consistent. So, yeah, they will put thoughts into your head that will upset you. And then they feed off the negative emotional energy that generates. And that took a while to notice. I had no idea why they were so energetically drained. While I was in the prison, I always kept a small group of prisoners around me that I had an agreement with that I'd see them once a week. And the agreement was they would tell me everything their voices were saying in real time.
Wow.
While we were talking together.
Almost like a form of channeling?
Well, kind of like, so I would say something and then they would talk back and then they'd say, well, the voices are saying this.
Yeah. And
basically they were saying, get away from this guy.
Yeah.
Don't listen to anything he says. Don't show up for your appointments. And yet they did. So, I remember one time walking into the ER when I was working in one of the emergency rooms, and a patient I saw later, she said, as soon as I walked into the emergency room, her voices told her, stay away from that guy, he's dangerous. So what I found was working in the prison was that I could ask all the questions I wanted and not be in trouble with administration.
Yeah.
If a prisoner went to the warden and said, hey, this guy's asking me questions about my voices, he'd go, get out of my face, man. Yeah. That doesn't even hit the ambient noise level of the place. So I had always had a group of prisoners around me that I agreed I'd do everything I could to help them out. I'd see them once a week. I'd help them with everything I could help them with, trouble they get into with the administration or whatever. But the deal was they had to tell me in real time what their voices were telling them while we were talking. And sometimes I'd spend 3 or 4 hours at a time with these guys until, some of the other psychs started wondering, hey, I can't deal with these guys for more than 20 minutes. What's he doing in there with 3 hours? And that looks suspicious. But what I found is the voices ran negative patterns. They were always telling these patients to do stuff that would get them in trouble. And sometimes it got a little hairy because the voices would tell them to assault me, and they would say, well, they're telling me to attack you. And they would say, I'm not going to do it, but I want you to know that's what they're telling me.
Yeah.
And there were times they came in and, I remember one guy said, well, this guard really insulted me. He really disrespected me. And if that happens in prison, that's like bad news. That's like lighting the fuse to a stick of dynamite. And the prisoner was saying, I need to do something about this. So the voices are telling me to attack him. So to start with, I would tell all these prisoners I was working with, I said, as long as you are not an imminent threat to yourself or anybody else, if I don't feel you're an imminent threat, I'm not going to interfere. I'm not going to get you in trouble. I'm not going to have you locked down. But the minute I think you're going to hurt yourself or somebody else, I'm warning you ahead of time. I will take action.
Yeah.
I will have you locked up. So it was like a fine balancing act, because if I had, once that prisoner told me, hey, the voices are telling me to assault the guard, to stab the guard. If I had him locked down at that point, that would spread to all the others. And that would be the end.
They call you a snitch and you can't.
They call me a snitch.
They wouldn't open up to you. Yeah.
They wouldn't open up to me. So it was like a walking a fine line. So what I did is increase the number of appointments with that guy, told him, hey, listen, if you feel like you're losing it, come to my window and throw a rock in my office window and I'll get you in as soon as I can. And I would closely monitor him, and every time a situation like that occurred, doing my best to not have to lock any of them down, because I knew what would happen. I'd be cut off immediately. All the rest would shut up too.
Now, have you found that it amplifies when these people get together? Because, obviously we talked about it, before we went live, the first time we talked, is that in prison, man, like you're in a cesspool of mental,
Yes.
People with mental problems, schizophrenia, so many demons, as far as because it's vile, it's nasty.
Yes.
We're talking about playing with feces. You just hear people, they want to see what their insides look like. Like it's some weird psychotic stuff that you can never think of if you tried your hardest. And you hear stuff that these people are doing. People with personality disorders, before the whole transgender movement got really big, when you would see these not transgender, they call them different names, but in the penitentiary, you have men walking, they're wearing panties. They find panties. Somebody brings them panties from the outside, and they're wearing panties. They're wearing stock. They wear a mop on their head. They change their manner. They're acting like women, and they get stuff from it, like just these weird forms of psychosis that these adults are going through. One guy, and again going with the feces stuff, there is a fascination with demons and bile and throw up and feces and urine. And this by being in the prisons and in the hospitals. But one guy was afraid to use the bathroom to do a number 2 because he thought that the Freemasons would take his feces, his poop, and he said they would make idols out of it. The Freemasons are taking their poop and making idols out of it. So he would poop in a chip bag and fold it up and throw it away in the garbage. Because in his mind, I don't know if somebody told him this, if the demons told him, if he watched the documentary, I don't know. I know that some of these conspiracies and these weird things feed the schizophrenia, feed the paranoia, feed the demons with these different ideas that they just run and new stuff like that. And I know that's just scratching the surface with the things that you've heard and individuals smearing it on them and things like that. But it gets really, really, really far out that if nobody's ever been around, it's overwhelming. Like, I'm sure you've had a lot of hard days, because I worked with the prisoners for a short period of time, working for the city, and the stuff that I experienced was insane. And I know if you were in there and you were that symbol of someone that I can be open with and tell you what I'm experiencing, and you hear all of these stories, it is crazy. But when everybody gets together, is there more? Does it amplify? Do they outdo one another? Because you're like in a whole cesspool of. It's one thing to have one friend who's suffering, but when you got 17 guys who are doing this weird stuff and you're just hearing stuff back to back to back, you think it amplifies it when they all get together or something?
Well, let me address two of your points there. I think your point with feces is interesting because you're right. And I saw this more in the state hospital than I did in the prison, is they have the worst ones, okay, have some kind of fixation with feces. Yeah. They'd smear it all over their rooms. They'd paint their rooms with it. They'd smear it all over the floor. They'd smear it all over themselves.
Draw pictures with it and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Crazy stuff you wouldn't even fathom. Yeah.
The worst one at the state hospital that I'd heard of was this skinny guy in one of the psych units I worked with. It was the third floor where they had the worst. So there was nobody rehabilitatable up there. So I seldom went there. But there was a skinny patient who was completely naked. He was standing in front of the big window. They had barred windows, completely naked. And when the attendant approached him to try to get him back off the window, he turned around, he smiled, he put his hand behind his butt, and he crapped diarrhea. And he had a handful of diarrhea, and he flung it into his mouth and all over his face. And he looked at the attendant and he said, "Good boy, good boy." So it was like the voices were telling him, yeah. Good job, good job. You know, and the poor attendant was like, "Oh my God," you know, and he's got to clean that up. There were a number of times where the rooms were smeared. There was one fella who slit his wrist and the blood sprayed all the way to the ceiling and all over the walls. I didn't know it would go that far. There were horrible things that happened there. The prison, like you said, was a cesspool. You could feel it as soon as you walked in. Yeah, you
get a headache. Like, you have to be. It's if you're intuitive or empathic, like a lot of Christians are, a lot of people are. It's intimidating. I'll say that it's very intimidating. And if you're not walking in your power, if you have any chinks in your armor, they know about it. It's intense.
Yeah, we had a saying there among some of us who were trying to do some good in that place, is that no good deed went unpunished. Yeah. And every time you tried to do something good, it would eventually get wiped out. Yeah. There was one time for years I worked on these people. They were doing nothing to change their thinking, absolutely nothing. And all their behavior was fostered by the way they were thinking. They didn't do anything to change their thinking. They had a small group of chaplains who were fundamentalists that a lot of prisoners just didn't want anything to do with. But I started developing programs when I got there, and they would cheat on them. You know, so it was like, how do you tell they actually learned the stuff? We started with written tests that took a lot of time, took a lot of effort. They would find all kinds of ways to cheat on them. They'd put answers inside of pens. They'd write answers on their hands. I mean, they would cheat on everything. So over several years, my wife's a computer programmer. We developed a computer program that ran on cheap computers that would administer the test for booklets on parenting, on alcohol and drug abuse, on codependency, on all these subjects that these guys were plagued with. They would take out the study guide, which we weren't copyrighted, and they'd study it, and then they'd come back and they'd take the test on the computer. So it took years, but we developed a computer program that would randomly administer the questions. Every time it did, it would scramble the answers. And then at the end, it would grade, score, and data bank the tests. So here was a cutting edge system that took us forever to develop. And we started setting it up, and hundreds of inmates were going through. And some of the wardens I worked with were, not all of them, but some of them were advanced. So they called it the front-end drug interdiction program. Any prisoner who got caught with any kind of drug on the unit was required to go through the substance abuse part of this.
SAP.
So it was very quick. They'd come in, they'd turn in their booklet. That was their ticket for the test. The computer they'd take the test on the computer. They would score their answer. If they passed, they were given the next one. If they failed, they were given the old one back again. And that all it took was one of the prison counselors to start the computers with 2 encrypted passwords, and then just kind of monitor the lab. And they had inmate clerks who would take care of handing everything out. They virtually had to do nothing except be there. So we spread these all through the Arizona system. They were working great. We had thousands of inmates going through. All of them thought the program was great. They would steal the booklets, send them to their wives and say, look what I'm learning. They went up in other systems in Oregon, Nevada, Kentucky, we had one. And eventually what happened in our system is the counselors were too freaking lazy to start the computers and feed in the encrypted passwords. So they turned that over to an inmate clerk who then took over the program and turned it into a business. So they would say, oh, well, we'll pass you on this and give you the answers to this if you let me get 3 cans of Coke or some tobacco from the store. So the inmates had taken it over. And it not only one unit, it was units throughout the state. When I would go visit, I would see that the inmate clerks were running these programs. And it was it went from one of the most positive programs that they'd ever had, one of the cheapest, most measurable, time-effective rehabilitation programs that the prison system has ever had, to one of the biggest scams that ever existed.
It messed up whenever they quit letting counselors or people come in to teach it, and they let the inmates teach each other, right?
No, they didn't have to teach anything. They learned from the booklets.
Yeah.
So they were given a booklet, say alcohol education. There were 14 sections. Here's section 1, study it, come back, take the test next week. They'd come back, they'd hand in the booklet. That was their ticket to access the computer. They'd go to test 1, alcohol education program, bring it up, and the computer would administer, score, and data bank their test.
Yeah. Okay. Insane.
But the encrypted passwords to prevent inmates from getting into it had to be fed in by a staff member. But what these counselors did, and it wasn't just one unit, it was all over. It was almost like they were all linked. They gave these inmate clerks those encrypted passwords, and they turned it into a business. And when I found that out, that this was happening on a large scale, I went to up to Phoenix to the Department of Corrections and the head of Substance Abuse Services, and I said, you guys need to do something about this. You've turned it from one of the most positive, cost-effective programs that you've ever had. Now it's one of the biggest scams, that is reinforcing criminal behavior that you've ever had. I said, if you don't stop this, if you don't have your staff run these things, then shut them down. And that the head of the substance abuse section at that time looked at me and she goes, you work for us. We don't work for you. You do what we say. We don't do what you say. And I said, no, not in this case. I didn't develop this program. It's copyrighted in my wife's name. She's the programmer. You either run it right or you shut it down. You know what they did? They shut down all the programs, every single one. Here's tens of thousands of dollars worth of computers that they just let rot. And I stopped supporting the rest. And that didn't just happen in this program, in our prison here. It happened in all the other prisons too, including one federal prison. Or a warden would say, we don't want any prisoner on any kind of computer ever for any reason,
Yeah.
and they would shut them down.
Yep.
So any good thing that you tried to do in the prison system was wiped out. And the programs that they do have for the most part are just for show. You know, they're not measurable. They just show up, they get a certificate, they contract it just to try to make it look like they're trying to.
Yeah, I've been through this program and that program and this program.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, hey, we're gonna go to a quick break here, and I got a bunch more questions for you, Jerry. This is heating up, and anybody has questions as well, post them in the chat, and we'll try to get to them. And so we'll go to a quick break. We'll be right back, guys. Wow, so the throne room meditation, man, this was just like a new level for me of creating encounter. Really the process behind it is going in for myself, having an encounter with the Lord, tapping into the Spirit and getting in His presence, and really just petitioning the Father's heart and saying, God, what would you say to them? If I'm bringing these people with me here, if they're doing this guided meditation and we're going through this journey, we're having fun, we're seeing things, we're experiencing new feelings and emotions and sensations, what would you say to them? So it's channeling the Father's heart and relating it back to the people. So man, it's just a beautiful encounter. And I remember when I wrote the first one, I was so excited about it, and it was just God speaking to my heart. I was able to channel the Father's heart. And I would read the script to people because I was just so excited while I was working on it. And every time that I would just read the script, the presence of God would just invade me, and I just burst into tears and I couldn't even read it. I'm just like, let me copy and paste it and send it to you. But every time I listen to it, I'm immediately translated back into the throne room of God, and everything's good there. That's the place where everything is okay, where in the scriptures it says that we are to hide under the shadow of the Almighty. This is the throne room of God. This is the place that we can encounter for ourselves, but this is also a place in which we dwell. So a part of us is always there, and we have access to that. Now there's people who have never encountered this before in their life, and it's a totally new experience for them. And almost every time I get a testimony back from someone, they just say how God wrecked their lives, that they didn't know what they were getting into. The next thing they know, they're in the presence of God, wrapped up in His glory. He's communicating His love to them, and it just totally wrecks their lives. So make sure you check out the throne room guided meditation visualization that I brought to the table. All right, we're back. And guys, you can actually get that meditation for free at TruthSeekah.com right now. We've made it free to the public, so make sure you go check that out. Jerry, got a bunch of questions here, man. We've been covering so much. We kind of talked a little bit about it. You gave one example off the bat when we're talking about how people get into demonic oppression, demonic possession, however you want to call it. We talked about drug use, crystal meth. Now, what about those individuals who have never experimented or used drugs and they're still suffering from these type of symptoms? Is it just, you know, when they hear those thoughts, when they think those negative thoughts, is it going deeper into that? Because I feel like even with the drug use, that is like amplified, these really weird outside of space and time dark thoughts that people are just kind of thinking about, or they can't get it out of their head because they don't have any control over their thoughts for the duration that they're on crystal meth or crack cocaine or anything like that. But those seem like for the average person that's extreme cases of people who are demonically possessed or should be demonically possessed. But again, you were saying that everybody deals with these thoughts. How do these entities or these spirits get access to somebody's life to where it becomes second nature? Because even when we're using these terms like voices and things like that, not everybody can resonate with that term. They've never heard an audible voice. They've never had this inner dialogue of going back and forth with something that seems foreign. Some of it's more subtle. What are some of the different doorways that people are opening up for demonic possession and oppression?
Well, there's a number. One of the most powerful and the quickest, like we said, was meth. And, that came on while I was in the prison. All of a sudden, all these prisoners are coming in, hearing voices saying they started when they started using meth. And what was interesting is these voices, when they ran out of drugs, those voices would tell them where to be and when to be there to get more meth. And they show up at that spot, and a complete stranger would show up with meth.
Wow.
Or they'd tell them which houses to rob, when to be there, generally where the loot was, not specifically, but generally whether the person was up and when to get out of the house. Yeah. So here's these voices telling them stuff that they didn't know, that they didn't have that information in. Other ways people get possessed is with Ouija boards. I mean, I don't know how many people I've talked to who are playing with Ouija boards that all of a sudden started hearing voices. Mm-hmm. One of the latest ones I've heard, and it's been repeated, is it's these people who play with, now I actually know and speak to people who do this, but they're not possessed, but the electronic voice recordings. Where
the
they're
EVP
recording
stuff,
stuff.
You're talking about trying to find ghosts and things like
Right,
that,
right.
and those are getting really popular too, with all kind of apps and TikTok, filming your house and trying to find a ghost in it, and even if it's not a ghost, like what it does in your mind, like to even open those areas up for something to present itself to you.
Yeah, it opened something up. I've spoken to a number of patients who said I was playing with a Ouija board and it started answering questions, and then I started hearing the voice in my mind, and then it stayed there. Now, another thing with these entities is like sharks smelling blood. They are attracted to negative emotional energy like a shark is attracted to blood. So some of the largest, most numerous ways people get infested with these things is by extreme physical, sexual, and emotional abuse. Okay? So they start running these negative thoughts, and generating negative emotion. And these things just, here's a hog's trough, and they just kind of move in. And from what I've seen, parents who are schizophrenic generate the conditions for their offspring to also become schizophrenic. They beat them, they torture them. I've heard, they burn them with cigarettes, they lock them in dark closets, they do that kind of stuff. Yeah. And that starts another generation. So it's not genetic. They have no genetic proof of this, and here's the medical establishment trying to kind of reason that it's some kind of physical malady.
Yeah.
It's not. This is spiritual warfare. These voices are negative, destructive, parasitic entities. And I don't know if you've read anything on Carlos Castaneda. Have you ever read any of his work?
A little bit, not much though.
Well, at one point, toward the end of his series, he said, they give us their minds.
Yep.
So it is a separate mind that is operating within you, and they don't want the individual to realize that they are with them. So I don't know how many patients that had actually asked them, who are you? What are you? Guess what their answer was?
I'm you.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
We are you. And they don't want the person to get any kind of notion that they are separate from who that individual is. And you were asking a while ago, how do you tell the difference of between something positive and negative? The only real way is by the intent. What is the intent of that thought? If the intent of that thought is to get you to behave in a negative manner, to get you in trouble, to generate negative emotional energy, that is them. And what they do is they install these thoughts. They're like fishermen. They'll throw a negative thought in your head and say, hey, will he bite on this? And if you do, it's like, okay, they hook you and they throw more.
Yeah.
They reel you in and intensify that. So these people that get pissed off and then, they're this much pissed off and then they keep remunerating and building and building and building. That's them feeding the fire. What they're after is that negative emotional energy that is only generated by humans.
Yeah.
And that's what they feed off of. So if you think we're at the top of the feeding chain, we are not. They're feeding on us constantly.
Yeah. Now, I mean, I always love to play the devil's advocate, and I think that's how we get to the bottom of a lot of these hard questions. You know, when you have people who are struggling and then they get into church, right? They start going to church, they start doing better, and the voices leave. They read the Bible, and there's this standoff, you know, stuff that they have going on, because like inwardly, like deep down in their psyche, I feel like they know that it represents light, it represents Jesus, that is of which is good, and they're bad. They've done a lot of bad stuff in their life. There's reasons that they shouldn't approach that. The voices, the demons are reminding them why they're not worthy to approach something so holy, something so beautiful, and they're just being reminded. That's definitely going on. My question is for the place of solace for the individual, because I feel like if someone has like a blanket that is their comfort blanket, as long as I have that blanket, I'm going to feel comfortable. And so someone can be really afraid, have their blanket, and they feel better. They can, you know, their stuffed animal they had when they're a kid, as long as they have that animal, it brings them peace. And so inwardly, the struggle of, you know, feeling insecure, feeling scared, as long as I got that, I'm okay. As long as the door's cracked, I'm okay. You know, as long as you don't shut the door, I'm okay. Like we have these weird connections in our minds with what's going to make us okay. And so a lot of people, when it comes to church, when it comes to Jesus, if we step into that, we step into Jesus, we'll be okay. If I call on his name, I'll be okay, right? There's this mental connection. With that being said, my question, have you looked into it yet? Have you looked into any other cases? If not, it'd definitely be a good thing to look into. Someone coming from maybe the Muslim faith who is dealing with schizophrenia and demonic entities. They would call them jinn, right?
Yes.
In the Muslim tradition. Are they seeing any breakthrough as they become more religious? Are they able to step into what represents peace and being a devotee of the Quran and starting to, you know, keep the feast and those kind of things that they do, that in their sight, they're taking a step to that which is good. They're coming away from the drugs, the gangs, whatever negative lifestyle, to step into more of a holy, set apart life, and knowing that mentally that doing that is saying goodbye to the person that they was as they become more devout. Are they seeing similar results in the Muslim faith and other religions as well?
Yes. I've spoken to an Egyptian psychiatrist. I've spoken to a professor in Turkey. Yes, they do call them the jinn. They are more aware of the demonic side than people in the Western world. It's almost like, oh yeah, angels are fine. I mean, we believe in angels. Angels are good. Everybody's got a guardian angel. But then when you start talking about the demonic side, they don't want to hear it. You know, they don't want to. What is it? 23 times in the Bible, Jesus cast out demons, and these crazy people returned to sanity.
Yeah,
it's like they just totally ignore that. Psychiatry and psychology and even counseling. I mean, I've been through all these in the educational system and graduate school. Nowhere. I mean, what they teach is as spiritually dry as the Sahara Desert. You know, I felt like my soul was parched when I was in undergraduate and graduate school. And they're not going to find any answers until they realize that you can't split off the mind from the spirit. I mean, it's a spirit that thinks, it's a spirit that feels, it's the spirit that is aware. It's not the body. This is just this chemical biological spacesuit. And mental illness, it has to do with spiritual illness. And they're trying to keep it physical, and it's the biggest scam that they've ever perpetrated. and drug companies have an awful lot of money to keep it going. They've influenced academia. They're still teaching this. If you look at the drug commercials for antidepressants and antipsychotics, they're still preaching the chemical imbalance stuff, which has been disproved over and over and over again. So they can't find anything, and then they jump back to going, well, it must be something. We'll find it within the next 10 years. It's got to be a very complex mixture of all these different things. But they won't ask questions about the voices. They're hallucinations. So they just wrote them off. And psychiatry just gets up on the grandstand and goes, we hereby declare that these voices that schizophrenics are hearing are hallucinations because we said so. And that's it. They have no research. They have no backing. They have nothing to, and they haven't even investigated it, because why would you investigate a hallucination? But when these things, all they got to do is open their eyes and see some of the stuff I'm talking about. It's right there in front of their friggin' faces.
It's ancient.
All they got to do is look. It's right there. You know, and they won't even see. They walk around like this.
Well, I mean, I think if you're secular, you have to come up with another explanation, because that would validate the Bible. That would validate spirituality. That would validate demons, and that can't be true. So they have to come up with these other explanations in science and medicine, right? I mean, how much money are they out? Again, where you have the people where they get $1,000 a month to be sane, or become devout in going to church and cleaning up your life, and the voices subsiding then, which is what you've been finding. I mean, so they have to have another reason, that, you know, way that to approach this, to get freedom from it, or even just to call what it is. Again, the word freedom, they wouldn't even use that word, right? That's definitely a very Christian thing to say, that you can get freedom from these voices. And I'm speaking from experience. Again, you know, I have my experiences and encounters. What I want to ask you though, because there is this connection there, when it comes to medicine, a lot of people, especially in Christendom, they frown upon taking medicine to you know, help you to help you cope and things like that. And I think a lot of it is connected with spirituality. You don't need medicine, you just need Jesus, that kind of thing, right? And some people would say there are reasons and there are things that, you know, medication can help with. I don't know if it's with mental illness or whatever, but there's this movie which is based on a true story, The Exorcism of Emily Rose. And so you're familiar with that one, right? Where they were trying to cast the demons out of this girl. She was oppressed with demons, possessed. They're trying to cast the demons out, but the demons had legal right to be there in her life due to the medicine that she was taking. And that they would always get her so far, but the doctor would never let her stop taking the medication. And supposedly she ended up dying, and it was because the demons never left, because they had a legal ground to be there through the medicine that she was taking. Well,
I would tend to, I'd say that would probably be atypical. Now, you know, as much as I rail against these medicines, what they do is they will calm the person down. Okay, they're major tranquilizers.
Yeah.
So even some of the stuff that I put out, what to do about the voices, you know, how to handle them, well, the reading of the Bible. The voices in a lot of patients are so strong that if they open the Bible, the voices immediately blast them, or they try to do anything to weaken the voices on their own. The voices just make their lives miserable, and nightmares and constant harassment and constant put downs and you know, you're no good, you're worthless, you're stupid, what makes you think and it's just a constant barrage of this, you know, all their waking hours, and then nightmares at night. The medications do work to weaken the voices. Seldom will they get rid of them, but on those medications, while the voices are weakened, then they can start reading the Bible or doing some of the exercises they need to do,
yeah,
or some of the programs that we've put out to help them get rid of the voices.
Yeah.
But they're way too strong to start with.
Yeah.
But they are very dangerous. They do shrink the brain. They rot out the peripheral nervous system. They destroy the frontal lobe, and they cause irreparable damage with long-term use. So they should only be used as a stopgap measure. But what psychiatry and the mental health system are doing now is they're putting these people on these toxic medications that are slowly destroying their nervous systems and saying you must stay on these. And some of them are being ordered on those legally. And they go off, and it's just a big revolving door. They go off them, they go back to the hospital, they get put back on them again, they're released, they go off them again. It's just, and each time the psychiatric mafia and the big pharma is making $3.7 billion a year selling these toxic medications. All of them have side effects. Yeah. And some of the worst side effects are the antipsychotic drugs. So yeah, they are useful. I don't want to say, hey, don't take them. And the voices don't want them on those meds, and they'll tell them, don't take these meds. Yeah. They're poisonous, they're toxic. And one thing I did see though, is the voices will say, quit those meds and drink alcohol or take meth or take heroin. You may as well these drugs will make you feel better, not worse, like the psych drugs. So that what they want to do is get them addicted. And once they're addicted, then that negative emotional energy of fighting the addiction is constant. So what they want is a person who constantly generates negative emotional energy that they feed off of. And one thing I found interesting is that the voices didn't like the patients taking marijuana. They didn't want them using marijuana, because it calmed them down without the after effects. They wanted them using alcohol or cocaine or heroin or meth or some other drug. They didn't like marijuana, and they actually told them not to take it.
My friend here, Jaguars, in the comment section, he says that exact response from the psychologist led to my mom's death in 2005. I'm glad you guys are bringing this to light. I have known this for many years now, but if I had known it then.
Well, they won't let this information out. Any alternative treatment that is brought forth, they will jump on it with both feet. Yeah. Dr. Irmak, a very well-respected researcher in Turkey, wrote an article in one of the journals. He watched a shaman actually cure schizophrenics repeatedly. And what he did is wrote a journal article saying, hey, listen, I've witnessed this. Maybe the medical establishment ought to at least take a look at this. Once that was published, they attacked him all upside down and inside out, and it was just attack after attack after attack. You had all these academics that would jump in there and go, you're trying to bring us back to the Stone Age, and medical people would jump in there and go, yeah, you're full of crap, and how could you even suggest such a thing? I mean, the reaction was so volatile that the poor guy was beat down. He's just saying, hey, why don't you take a look? This is working. Yeah. And I remember one lady from, I think it was Oxford in England, she knew nothing about schizophrenia. You could tell from what she wrote, and she was just blasting him. Man, I sent her an email and just told her where to get off the boat, man. She just ego, just raw ego.
That's one thing that we were talking about Dr. Stella Emanuel, the lady who spoke out, which was one of the doctors on this panel of doctors that spoke out against COVID, and what was, that they were seeing people cured from COVID by taking care of their bodies and vitamin C and these kind of zinc and things like that. And they made a lot of people mad, because they were coming out speaking out against doctors and speaking out against the pharmaceutical industry and against COVID. And these were doctors speaking out against it. And they find out that she is a deliverance minister, that not only that she's a doctor, but she helps people spiritually. And she's been casting out demons and people who have been coming to her for years who are, demonically possessed and oppressed. And she's been helping them cast out demons. People come to her in all types of mindsets and personas, getting set free and cast out. And so when they was to talk about it, they just wanted to, go after her character. Oh, you believe that they're sexual demons. And because that was her big thing. She had a video on the incubus and succubus and those things, the sexual demons that are getting on people through sexual misconduct and crazy sexual orgies and just stuff like that. And then these weird connections that are, and so they all came out, CNN and all these places. Instead of dealing with the information that she was bringing to the table, they tried to sabotage her character. Again, you believe in the primitive, prayer minister and stuff like that. And it was funny when they did these interviews with her that she didn't back down. She's like, yes, I believe in it. And she just seen that as promo for the light in the work that she was doing. And she got so much traffic where they tried to, demonize her and make fun of her and ridicule. She said, ridicule me all you want. We're seeing results. People are calling me from all over the world who need help, and we're helping them get freedom. And this is somebody who was out there bringing this to the forefront. Deliverance ministers, spiritual warfare, demons and stuff like that. So that was really cool. But like you said, that the rest of the people in the medical community, they denounce them, make fun of them, ridicule them. That's what they always do. That they always do that with the truth anyway.
Well, they don't make any money curing people. They make money endlessly treating them, symptoms, like they do in the mental health system. Every single one of those 300 some diagnoses that are in the DSM, their directory, their Bible, the psychiatric Bible, the directory of statistical mental illness type things. Every single one of those diagnoses are fabricated. They're made up by a board of psychiatrists that get together and go, well, we've seen these symptoms. We're going to call it this illness now. So that they started off with, less than 100, I think it was 70 something, back in the 50s. And now it's over 300. And every year they add new mental illnesses that they make up. And here comes the drug companies right behind them. Oh yeah, if you have these symptoms, we have these drugs to take them. And 6 months later, they're being sued. But now they rigged it through Congress and the Senate where they can't be sued anymore. I mean, they've got to be brought under control. I mean, but they're so powerful and they have so much money. People have to understand that it's the spirit that gets sick before the body does.
Yeah, it's deep. I was talking about conspiracy theories and people watching videos, and there's something listen, we always know that something's going on with the television, with them being able to transmit thoughts and belief systems, and they'll put out a TV show and it'll change the consciousness of the people. Like there's some really deep spiritual stuff when it comes to the television, and a lot of this stuff that's coming out of there are messing with people. People are watching movies and stuff and they feel like they got it, like some kind of spirit. With people watching documentaries or hearing ministers or whatever, there's a lot of people in my audience who I feel like are dealing with schizophrenia, dealing with what I found, dealing with spirituality and religion. There's a lot of people even in the churches who seem it's not as bad as it once was. Maybe it changed a little bit, but there's some weird psychosis. There's some delusional people, if you will. We'll say strong delusions. Now, if that's demons working in a different way with weird thoughts that you think are truth, that you think are reality, I have to understand that a lot of people who find my work, they find other people that I'm shoulder to shoulder with first, who I believe teach some things that aren't healthy and weird things that I think give birth to psychosis, which can open up the door for possession and oppression. Some of this part for me, I'm real leery with mediums, people trying to contact the dead and disembodied spirits. Again, you mentioned the occult and Ouija boards and things like that, opening up doors. It definitely opened up doors in my life. I'm in the middle of those people. I talk to them. I'm trying to get in front of their audience because I feel like I have the antidote, which I believe is Christ, which is God, which is the Bible, beautiful worship music. I prescribe people that stuff. Like, how do I get free? I give them, certain things. But there's some people who they have these delusions about these things that they've seen or heard in past lives. And there's like, I have people in my audience, they'll reach out to me. And one woman claims that she's my mother from ancient Egypt. And she's reincarnated here to connect with me and to watch over me and guide me. And I don't believe it. It doesn't resonate with me. I think she's delusional. I think she's suffering. But you notice that spirituality and some of these other religious ideas, they're like a breeding ground or a cesspool, even much like the prisons maybe, to these weird, far out ideas. We could see them even giving birth to weird cults. Like back in the 90s, we had Heaven's Gate. They thought that the UFO was traveling behind the Hale-Bopp comet, I believe it was one of the comets, and that when it passed over, if they killed themselves, they can descend and go aboard the UFO. And they got enough people to believe these things, and they're still going on. Those are really destructive. Hey, take your own life. Some of them I think are more subtle. I have people thinking that they're my mother. Another lady thinks that she's my wife from a previous life, and we need to reconnect, and just crazy off the wall stuff that I think is demonic. But I feel like these conspiracy theories and some of these different spiritual ideas pour gas on the fire for some of these weird delusions. What do you think about that? Like, we need to be careful about what we put in front of our eyes. The Bible says the eyes are the windows to the soul, and that we shall set no evil thing before our eyes. And it also, Job talks about how it'll cling to you. These evil things cling to you that you behold. What would you say about that? The past lives, and some people think they're Jesus reincarnated, they're Moses here back from the dead, and they have this. With that, there's like this mandate that they have to these huge, grandiose ideas of themselves that are much bigger than little old them who has been unimportant their whole life. When it comes to some of these ideas, what would you say when it ties into schizophrenia and demonic oppression?
Well, I think to start with, you're exactly right with the television. So if you look at how these negative entities operate, they want to constantly keep the person upset, angry, feeling guilty, shameful, any negative emotion. They want to generate and feed that. Okay, so you look at the kind of stuff that comes on TV, these horror movies, that scare the bejesus out of people. I mean, one after another, generating negative, fearful, emotional energy. And then these commercials that come on, buy this deodorant, you stink, feed your senses, buy this, buy that. I mean, you're being constantly bombarded with information to keep you focused outside yourself and entangled with physical reality and the senses. Yeah. And the Bible wants you looking inside. It wants you finding your spirituality inside. It says your life is inside. It comes that your energy doesn't come from you. It comes from a greater spirit. And everything on the television is negative news, conspiracies. You turn that thing on and it's just, you're being blasted and you're being programmed. And then you have the mainstream media that is just completely controlled by the cabal, feeding you constantly. And this is what people are digesting, and it's only recently coming out as to how bad it actually is, and how these small group of wealthy people are actually controlling how people think and behave via the television. So yeah, we're being bombarded and refocused to focus outside into the physical instead of looking inside to the spiritual.
Yeah, there's a lot of that stuff, again, pouring gas on the fire for a lot of people in their delusions. And the interesting thing too, when we're reading the Bible, it talks about demonic strongholds, and it talks about that these are thought forms and ideas that go against who God says you are. And God says you're blessed, you're loved, right? So thoughts on the opposite of that: I'm nothing, I'm stupid, I'm this, I'm that, I'll never amount to anything. Those thoughts is what these negative entities push out. And then when you come into agreement with those thoughts, they form an identity. And again, like you're having the identity of these spirits, if you will, demons that are coming from outside of you that you feel like are your own because you said yes. Maybe they've been familiar. The Bible talks about familiar spirits. You've become familiar with those thoughts about who you are, and it's not who God says you are. It's not for your greater good. It's something to bring about. It opens the door for depression, mental illness, and all of these things from entertaining these negative thoughts and ideas about yourself that are not good. And so it talks about the strongholds set in, and you think that eventually these demons are speaking. They're giving you thoughts, their thoughts, they're asking you to do things, and you think it's you that desire these things. You're thinking that why do I need to go, like you said, cut the head off of my dog? We hear people talking. I got interviewed a friend of mine several weeks back. He says he gets it all the time. They tell him to walk out in traffic, walk out in traffic. People talk about wanting to, run their vehicle off the bridge.
Exactly.
Just end it, man.
Yep.
End it. Be a lot easier. Go ahead and do it. And you pass the bridge. Like, wow, what? Yep. That was weird. Yep. Some people, when they get to the same bridge every time, do it. Like,
Yep.
It's insane.
Yep. And that's it. Do it. They try to get you to do it now. Now, what's so insidious about this is that for most people, those thoughts sound just like their regular thoughts that they have thousands of thoughts during the day. They sound just like their regular thoughts.
Yeah.
You can't tell the difference. In most cases, there's no change in voice tone or timbre or anything like that. They sound just like your normal thoughts. And I found that out through personal experience while I was working at the state hospital. I remember one day I'm going, what are these? What are these voices? What are they? And I'm praying to be shown what these voices are. What do they feel like? What are they? About a week later, what I do is after finishing the day at the state hospital, I was living on a lake, and I'd go out around sunset and I'd swim because all the traffic would die down. So a couple of weeks after I prayed for this, I was heading out into the lake swimming. I'm like a fish in water. I was a certified scuba diver for years. I loved the water, had no fear of it whatsoever. And I'm heading out into the lake at sunset, and I hit like this hypnotic stroke where I'm taking in just enough air to not feel uncomfortable, and I'm cutting through the water. And after a while, I started feeling tired, and I don't know how far I went. So I stopped and I looked up, and it's starting to get dark. And I look around, I'm way, way far out. I'm too far out and too tired to make it back to shore in the condition I was. But, I wasn't worried about it at all. I mean, the scuba training I had isn't like the scuba training today. We had to take a semester of skin diving and then a semester of scuba diving at Temple University before they even let you strap on a tank. And they really put you through the paces there. They really, so yeah, I wasn't worried about it. They taught us a survival float. Kind of you put your hands behind your back and you lean over in the water and you're floating like a dead person. Your back's out of the water, your face is in the water. When you run out of air, you whip your head back, blow out the air, and then you start sinking. And then before your face goes under, you fill your lungs and you drop below the surface, and then you bounce back up again. You float there for as long as you can hold your breath, and then you hit your head, and you just do that. And it takes very little energy. If the water's warm, you could do that for days. So here comes this thought. It goes, you're too tired to make it back to the shore, which was true. Hey, it's getting dark and the lights are starting to go out on the shore. That's true. One other thing is that was true. And then the last one was, you're going to drown. And I'm like, where the hell did that come from? That was the furthest thing from my consciousness, the furthest thing from my thoughts. And it just kept repeating this over and over again. So as I was sinking after taking the breath, it would come back, and it sounded just like my normal thoughts. There wasn't any change or timbre. It was, it's like, what is it? Why am I telling myself these things? I mean, I'd never done that before. And there was no fear. There was no belief in it. But as I was sinking after taking a breath, it goes, see, you're sinking, you're heading for the bottom, you're going to drown. And I come back up and I go, what the hell is this thing? So I figured I'm going to spite it. So next time I went down, instead of bobbing to the surface, I let out air and I sunk further down. And by now it was dark. What you hit is a crush depth where the water pressure collapses your lungs, and then you start sinking really fast. So I hit that and I started sinking really fast, and I went, whoa, this is too fast. And I shot to the surface again. When I got to the surface, here it is again. You're panicking. You're too tired to make it to the shore. The lights are going out. You're going to drown. And I'm going, what the hell? So I'm going, okay, next time I let out the air. I sank really fast. I'm heading toward the bottom. I had no idea how deep the lake was at that point. I'm clearing my ears as I'm going down. And all of a sudden I feel this chilling cold coming up my legs. And considering what's going on, I'm like, whoa, what's that? And even before I got to the surface, I knew it was the thermocline. There's a layer of cold water that usually lays above the on the ground, on the floor of the lake, and it's heavy, so it sinks. So I hit the top, and here it's again. So you're panicking. You're too tired to make it back in. Here it is, ending with, and you're going to drown. And I'm like, what the hell is this? So I go down again. Hit the thermocline. Here the cold water comes all the way up my body, go through the thermocline. There was a layer of warm water below the thermocline, which I'd never encountered before. So all of a sudden I feel something coming up from my feet and moving up my legs. And I shot to the surface again. And before I got there, I realized it was the muck at the bottom of the lake. I thought it was rock because it was always rock along the shore. When I got to the top this time, it ran through that same scenario. You're going to drown, and it says, and there's a motorboat coming right towards you. It can't see you, and it's going to cut you to pieces. But I didn't hear it underwater. You can hear boat engines for a long way. I didn't hear it, but I look up, and in the distance is this motorboat moving in my direction. So I'm like, looking at it, and it's going, they can't see you. They're going to hit you. They're going to grind you to pieces, and nobody will ever know. And I'm like, well, I'm not worried about it. I had to duck below motorboats before while I was scuba diving. If I need to, I'll go down below the level of the engine. I'll stay there till it passes over. So I wasn't really worried about it. I was watching it. I was monitoring it, and I'm watching this boat come closer, closer, closer. And then it passes by about, maybe 15 yards in front of me. They didn't see me, goes by. I'm watching as it passes, and I'm not paying attention to the wake. So as I'm taking in a mouthful of air, that wake comes and it, fills my mouth, and I start coughing and sputtering, and I'm like, God darn it, and spitting it out. And here comes this thing again. See, you're coughing, you're panicking, you're going to drown. And I'm like, what the hell is this thing? So I went down again, and this time I hit the bottom, my feet stuck in the mud, and I'm floating above the bottom with my knuckles, like maybe 6 inches above the bottom. And I'm scared because this is a really weird thing. It's completely dark. It's completely silent. The water is so warm, I couldn't feel my body. My feet were stuck in soft muck. And I was worried enough to just only be aware. And I'm sitting there, my mind is blank, and I was aware that I was aware. And that's all there was, and it was like a peak moment, because that's what's there once you shut off all the senses, because all these senses are constantly flooding your mind. They're constantly driving your mind. But what's there when you remove the senses and you remove all thought is just awareness. That's what's there. It's just spirit. It's aware that you're aware. That's what's there. All this other stuff is forms the mind. All these thoughts form the mind. All the propaganda forms the mind. So these people in the deep state have been controlling us forever. I mean, forever. They manipulate what you think. They feed you thoughts. They control you that way. The Federal Reserve, a private bank, has turned us all into slaves forever. I mean, but to just free your mind, even if you have a mantra. One of the things the voices hate the most is the 23rd Psalm. So you were talking about like a blanket that you could hold on to. Yeah. The repetition of a 23rd Psalm is that blanket.
Yeah.
They hate that. They hate the Lord's Prayer, and they hate the song Amazing Grace. So I've had patients, more than one, tell me that when they repeated the 23rd Psalm, the voices reacted like worms thrown on a hot frying pan.
I told you, you watched my videos that I sent you, and that was the only thing that brought me solace, was opening the Bible. And there would be times that I had to run out of, when I was coming out of that stuff, the occultism and witchcraft, when I was going schizophrenic, going into a superstore to get groceries with my grandmother and my girlfriend at the time. It was surreal. Like, everyone's looking, the whole store is staring at me, and everybody's I'm walking past people and everybody's making direct eye contact, and I'm freaking out in my head. I got demons talking to me, and I got to get out of here. I got to go sit in the car. I got to get out of here. I was going through that stuff, man. It was so scary. But once I was coming out of it, I got back in the church and repented and asked for God's forgiveness for opening up those doors, and one by one, he began to shut those doors and kind of walk me through that process. And a lot of it, I had to I had to reteach my mind. I had to retrain my mind on how to what those blankets are. I had no blankets, right? Like what those blankets were. And again, they were scriptures. I could quote the scripture. I can listen to worship songs, certain music that immediately would bring me into the presence of God. I'd play that music and I'd immediately feel peace. I'd be crazy headed. Put that on, immediately feel peace. Remember, my wife was working out of town on a business trip, and I went with her, and we were out having a nice dinner out of town somewhere, and we're sitting at the table waiting on our food, and I can hear everyone talking in there's heightened psychic senses too, because you're opening up the doors to the occult. There's so much going on that you just don't know how to, you know how to process it. And I can hear everyone talking. I can hear what they're thinking. And I'm sitting at the table trying to focus on my wife when I can hear everyone talk. I gotta go. And I just got up and ran out pretty much and went and sat in the car. And I said, you pay for it. Bring it with me. I'll eat it at the hotel. And I cranked the car, and I had to put on worship music and open a Bible and start praying. It was so I was so crazy headed coming out of that stuff. And it took a while, but getting into the scriptures was, I'd be at family gatherings. And I had to go sit in the car and leave and start reading the Bible. I'd open the Psalms and start reading and start praying, and immediately that peace would come back to me. And it was a while till I was able to really be able to stand on my own and be in large crowds. That's a big one. A lot of schizophrenics cannot be in large crowds. I was outside one day. A buddy of mine, he was dealing with schizophrenia, and he was a Christian too, dealing with schizophrenia. And he came over, and he got out of his car. He was about to come walking in, and I was watching him. And he looked, seeing how many cars were there, and you could see it when it hit him. He said, no. He got back in his car and left. So he didn't even come in because he's seen all these people over here, and so it's so overwhelming for people. And that's my antidote. Like I prescribe people, hey, find you some good music. I usually tell them that, Bethel music, really beautiful worship music, and reading the scriptures. And, it works. It worked for me. That's the only thing I got. And even times like, it's not like as crazy as it was, but if I ever get overwhelmed just with life in my day-to-day, it still works for me. I tell even though it's not the same, like mentally or whatever, I'm cleaned myself up pretty good over the years, and I've learned how to deal and all that. I still keep myself in that same place of desperation because I feel like you could go back there. You know, a lot of people don't make it out. A lot of people don't make it out of that. Some people go.
That's right.
Some people make it out and go back. You know, and so I feel like what got me out is what keeps me out, and knowing that I need God and my desperation and His love and His kindness that extends to me daily is what helps me stay focused. Like, this life is overwhelming. Again, you're talking about images and thoughts and television shows. It's like designed. Like, you're lucky if you make it through this thing and you're okay, unscathed, you know, because the odds are against you. So this talk and this spirituality and Jesus and all of this stuff, like, we have to have this conversation because people are looking for a way out. It makes me be more vocal about my truth and about the reality of who Jesus is in my life and who He can be in your life when I hear about people in our community who get into other things. Maybe they're trying to start channeling the dead. They try to start contacting disembodied spirits or whatever. And I'm like, don't do that. Whatever, makes you think that that's a good idea. And if you think that I'm okay with it, let me be clear and let you know that, hey, you're messing with dangerous ground and these things are a lot smarter than you. Be careful. And then that and talking to people who are dealing with schizophrenia and who take their own life. And I know they listen to my podcast. Like, that's a loss, man, for sure. Like, I got to get more vocal. I can't give you another alternative. I love to talk about all aspects of spirituality, but they're not going to be the answer. They're not the end all answer. Jesus is, so it makes me, when I find out that people in my community or friends or whatever fall into different things, it makes me be more vocal. And some people are, you're a little bit more religious now. I was like, no, I'm always that, but let me be a little bit more clear with you. Like, you might need it a little bit more clear. Even though we have this conversation, I don't condone that. You know what I'm saying? My goal in this podcast, I talk to psychics. I talk to everybody. I talk to people. The goal is to get in front of that community, get in front of those people who are struggling with those voices, and they don't know where to go. They have no idea. They're not going to try church and religion. Religion's kicked them out, made fun of them, and for whatever reason it is, but I just let them know that, Christ hasn't kicked them out. God still loves them, and that love is what enables you to walk in freedom. That love is what enables you to walk in grace and peace, no matter what you're going through, no matter what thoughts you're thinking. People out here really going through it, right now, and it's designed to do that, so.
It is, and it's a fight because these things do not want people to move in a positive spiritual direction. They will do everything they can to distract them and move them away from that. Another strange thing that I found, I remember the day this happened, is while I was working in the prison, I saw that these voices ran patterns that were consistently negative. I strongly suspected that they were driving schizophrenia. So what I started doing was looking and experimenting with ways to interfere with those patterns and with the voices. And the prisoners started getting better. And then that group that I told you about, one after another, they came in and they would tell me the voices are really getting pissed with you. They're really getting angry with you. They're telling me not to come here. They're telling me you're dangerous. They tell me to sleep in. They don't like what you're doing. So one after another. And then one guy I'd been working with for a while, he turns around as he's leaving one day and he looks at me and he goes, "You realize what you're doing is dangerous, don't you?" And I'm just looking at him like, no, that hadn't crossed my mind. I'm thinking, well, whatever these things are, they're your thoughts, they're in your head, they're not in me, they belong to you. They can't affect me. And he turns around and he leaves, and I don't say anything, and I'm thinking about that. So he continues doing the different exercises that we've come up with, and he's getting better and better. The voices are getting weaker and weaker. And then one day he knocks on my door without an appointment, and he I said, well, hey, what's up? And he goes, hey, the voices want to talk to you. And I'm like, they want to talk to me personally? That never happened before. It was always, I'd talk to the patient tell me what the voices were saying. I'd tell him something, tell the voices to go jump in the toilet or whatever. And it went like that, but the person was always the in-between. And I said, well, come on and sit down. And what do they have to say? And he looks at me and he goes, out of these words came out of his mouth. It was, you have no right to interfere with our way of life. Our way of life. And then he goes, that wasn't me, that was them. They wanted that message. They wanted to tell you that personally. And it was like, It was at that point where I realized that these things, after denying it for decades, it was at that point I realized that these were individual entities that were functioning through these people. And I went to do a response and I said, well, tell them this. And he said, no, I don't need to tell them. They can hear you. They can see you. They can speak through me. So they see everything I see. They hear everything I hear. And that was a revelation to me too. So these things are actually, like Castaneda said, they give us their mind. And it's a separate mind that is parasitic in nature, like a virus. It's like a mental virus. And they cause the person to generate negative emotional energy, and that's what they feed off of. That's why you never see an energetic or happy schizophrenic.
Yeah.
They're always emaciated. They're always drained.
Well, that's why the scripture, again, going back to the scripture, Paul says, but you have the mind of Christ. There's a distinction with these different minds, or you want to say mind, personas. You take on this persona. Again, you're going back to how they have their own minds, will, and emotions that they put upon you, but they make you think that it's you. Hey, we want to overeat. Hey, we want to sexually indulge.
Right.
They make you think that it's you that wants this. You don't really want that. You don't want to keep going back to that dope. You don't want to keep going back to crystal meth and smoking crack and stealing from your family. You don't want to do that, but for some reason you can't stop it. You're not alone. Again, talking about these different personas that kind of sit in with you. When Jesus casted out demons, they introduced themselves as names. They had their own names. We are Legion. We are this. We are that. And they're letting you know. In my experience, these demons coming out naming themselves of what, at least their job or what they did or what they carry out. Very interesting that they present themselves and they have different names and stuff as well.
Yeah, there was a period of time where I was actually carrying on conversations with them.
Yeah.
And I did that long enough to realize that they were separate entities. And they would respond independently of what the person thought. So with the same person, the same individual that his voices were saying, you have no right to interfere with our way of life. I kind of ignored him and kept working with this guy, and he kept getting better and better and better. And then one day he comes into my office for his appointment, and he looks really strange. And that was after what I was doing was I was reading some shamanic stuff. I was reading stuff by Miguel Ruiz, who was talking about these kind of entities and them being parasites. And I didn't realize they were parasites at the time. But I brought that book into the prison. And when this same fella came in, I outlined a paragraph and I said, listen, this is a shaman talking about what seems to be similar to what your voices have been telling you. And it was also talking about the energy drain, So what I did was I started reading that to him and I said, I'd like your opinion on this. I got to the point where it started talking about the energy drain, and I looked at this guy and he looked like a zombie. He was just staring. He had this glazed over look. Yeah. And all of a sudden in back of my head, there was this like loud explosion of crackling, like an arc welder. And it was like crack, 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 crack. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? And it's like crack, 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 and it goes over to the right-hand wall. And I'm looking, but I'm afraid to take my eyes off of him because I'm thinking he's going to attack. And I pushed my chair against the back wall because what they did is they put female guards over the medical unit at that time. And, you know, by the time they got, I mean, they would be virtually useless if one of these guys attacked you. So you're basically on your own. Pushed my chair against the back wall, got ready to kick him back if he came at me. And I'm trying to split my attention between watching him with that strange affect and trying to see whatever it was that was making this loud, it sounded just like an arc welder, you know, crack, 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 crack. And it moved at a 45-degree angle up the right wall. And I'm kind of switching my attention back and forth, back and forth. And then it starts moving across the ceiling over his head. So I can see clearly, and there was nothing there.
Wow.
And crack, 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 crack. And all the while he's staring at me with this zombie-like stare. He's not moving. And I'd say to him, I said, do you hear that? He doesn't respond. He's just staring at me. And I'm like freaked out from his reaction and freaked out from this crackling. And then it starts crackling down the left wall, which is right next to my leg. And it jumps into this Rubbermaid trash can right at my leg. And I'm looking between that and him, and it's empty. It's completely empty, but this thing is crackling in there. And I'm like totally freaked out. Like, and it lasted 20, 25 seconds. It wasn't just a brief episode. It went on like seemingly forever. You know, and I'm kind of looking back and forth like, and then he slowly gets up and he goes, I gotta go. And he shuffles out of there, and I'm like, yeah, go, get out of here, go. So he finally leaves, and I'm shocked. I'm stunned. I'm actually just sitting there like, what the hell just happened? You know, and he leaves, and I go inspect the wall, and there's no burn marks. There's nothing. I see nothing that could cause that at all, but I clearly heard it. I went out into the hall, checked all the other doctors' offices down the hall. There's nobody there. I'm the only one in that wing. The female guard was up front. She didn't hear anything of this because I had the door closed. And I'm shocked. I mean, I just went into shock. It's like, what the hell just happened? And, you know, I canceled all my appointments for the day. I was stunned and there's nobody I could talk to about this. You know, I can't go to my boss and go, hey, man, it just happened. You're so, and I'm starting to wonder, am I going nuts? Am I going crazy?
That's what they want you to think. They want you to question your sanity. Yeah.
Well, I was. Believe me, I was. Yeah. And I didn't call him back probably for 2 months. I didn't call him back. And finally, I got up the courage to do that. And he comes in, and he's looking spry and chipper. I thought he would be decimated. I thought he would be destroyed. You know, if they could do that, they certainly could destroy him. But I'm looking at him, and he's looking good. And I said, "How are you?" He says, "I'm doing fine. I'm doing the exercises you gave me. I'm keeping the voices down. I'm able to function." And I said, "Well, have a seat." I said, "You know, we did some small talk, and then I said, the last time you were here, do you remember hearing that crackling?" And he goes, yeah, I heard it. And he says, "I'm surprised you did." And I'm like, "What was that?" And he said, "That was them." You know, I said, "You mean them, the voices?" He said, "Yeah, that was them. That was the voices." He said, "Well, what were they doing?" He said, "They were trying to scare you off." And I said, "Well, they did a damn good job of it." You know, and I said, "You looked really strange when you left my office." I said, "What were the voices telling you when you left?" He said, "They were telling me to go get a shank and stick it in your belly." That's a homemade prison knife. Yeah. And I went, you know, I'm thinking, he would never do that. I've been working with him for months. I mean, he would never do that. I felt I was safe. And I said, "Well, why didn't you do it?" And he looked me in the eye and he says, "I couldn't find one." And I went, holy cow. You know, so here was the realization that, this could get dangerous. You know, this could get dangerous.
That's why I was wanting to ask you, because obviously it could have got dangerous really quick, and you've seen some paranormal activity from this stuff, right? They want to, I don't know if they want to scare you for sure. They want awe you as well, show you what they have power in our realm, that kind of stuff. A lot of the big, I think as a Father Malachi Martin and a lot of other noted exorcists talk about the lifespan of an exorcist, especially in the Catholic tradition, is not very long. That once you're doing this kind of work, you have a target on your back. And a lot of people, even with that, they don't make it out. They go mad. They have to retire early. A lot of different stuff with those who step into spiritual warfare and casting out of demons or helping people work through their demons, if you will. There's many different ways to deal with it. And so you have a target on your back. So for you, obviously, that was, one example. Did you ever have any of those things, even when you go home and they try to mess with you or scare you? Did you go through any inner turmoil in your family life, in your spiritual life, or even see some more like poltergeist, paranormal type stuff going on?
Yeah, I did. It's interesting you say the lifespan of exorcists is cut short, because that's the same thing with psychiatrists. Their suicide rate is almost exactly the same as that of schizophrenics, which is 3 to 5 times out of the normal population. So these entities do not like them dishing out the drugs that calm these people and interfere with their harvesting of their loosh or their negative emotional energy. If they can bring down a preacher, that's 10 points for them.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But yeah, I always felt I was an adrenaline junkie all my life. I mean, I'm starting to slow down now. So for me, this was exciting and dangerous. But I always had this feeling that I was being protected.
Yeah.
And I remember one time I was talking to a schizophrenic gal in the ER and interviewing her. And all of a sudden she looks to my side and she's staring off to the side. And I'm like, hey, what's going on? And she goes, out of clear blue, she says, you're never going to get hurt doing this work. Out of the clear blue air. I'm like, where'd that come from? What makes you think that? She says, I see this giant angel behind you that is protecting you. You're never going to get hurt. And I never have. I've had some close calls. There was one where a psychotic alcoholic Apache, these guys were mean to start with. And I had an intern and I was kind of trying to show her what these guys are like. And I pushed him a little bit too far. He picked up a friggin' sofa chair and threw it at me, and it just clipped the top of my head and bounced off the wall. But other than that, I've never been hurt, but other people I've worked with have. But I never considered it. So that's interesting that the exorcists, but yeah, I got to where, and I don't know how I developed this. I don't know exactly when it started, but I know it was active while I was in the later years of the prison and all through the 10 years I worked psychiatrist in the ER. I could actually get to where I could feel these entities. I couldn't see them. I couldn't hear them, but I could feel them. Yeah. And it was a very unique feeling. It was like this icky, cold electrical energy. There's no other feeling like it. And
did you feel the intimidation with that at all? Was there like the intimidation at all? Because they like to do that a lot too.
Well, I felt intimidated a couple of times when it was so strong. I thought it was going to break through. So I always felt that I had this protective armor on, and that extended a few feet beyond me. But there were times when these things were so strong, I felt that was like Star Trek pushed to with like a thousandth of an inch above my skin. And I always wondered what would happen if it gave way. That was always like, what if it breaks? What if it gives way? Because I could feel the intensity. So these patients couldn't lie to me. I'd say, well, are you hearing the voices? And they'd go, no. And I'd say, yes, you are. And this is how strong they are. They go, how do you know that? And I said, well, I can feel it. And also what they didn't want, the last thing these things wanted their victims to know was that they were energetic parasites. And they had to know that, because if you had a parasite on you, you wouldn't just go, oh, that's okay. You do something to remove it. So if you found something was sucking on your life energy or sucking on your body or your blood, you'd want to get rid of it automatically. You don't want that kind of thing happening. So these things did not want these patients to know that they were energetic parasites. And that's what set off that crackling thing, when I came to understand now that there was a situation where it became very clear that they were energetic parasites, very clear. So from then on, I had to show these people, well, these things are energetic parasites. And I'd say, every time they come, you're completely drained, right? Yeah, right. Well, where'd your energy go? Well, I don't know. And there was another I don't know that went on for ever. They didn't know what happened. And I'd say, well, you didn't use it. You were laying in bed. You were rolling around in bed having nightmares or fighting with the voices. You didn't use that energy. Where did it go? Well, I don't know. It just disappeared. Some of them said they felt it just leaving. They could feel it leaving. Mm-hmm. The very last thing that these entities want people to know is that they're feeding off of them. So every time I went to tell a patient, and I had to be careful because, the psychiatrists aren't going to like this. So in the ER, they didn't leave you any time to really work with people. So what I had to do was determine who could benefit from the information I had, how much of it I could give them, and how far I could push it before they left, and then hope that they could figure it out on their own. Because they wanted, all the hospital wanted was for you to determine what should be done with that patient, either get him out, hospitalize him, or send him to a mental health clinic, or tell his family. They wanted him out of there. They didn't want psych patients holding up beds. They didn't want you doing any kind of therapeutic work or helping these people. All they wanted to do was medicate them, charge them, and get them out of there. So I did what I could to help them. And one of the things was to make them aware that they were being fed off of. I knew that as soon as I broached that topic, the voices were going to go nuts. They were going to go crazy. They did it consistently every time. So what they would do, they ran a pattern, which was really interesting. As soon as the voices realized I was about to tell the patient that they were parasitic entities, they would, number one, tell the patient to get out of the office, to leave, to go back to their bed, to escape the emergency room. But first they'd say, don't listen to anything he said. They'd say, he's a nutcase. Don't listen to anything he says. He's bizarre. It's all lies. Don't listen to him. But by then I gave them enough information to know that I knew stuff that they didn't about their own voices. So they stayed there. The second thing they would do is say, get out, get away from him, escape the ER, get out of the hospital, discharge yourself voluntarily, get away from this guy. If they didn't do that, they would then tell them to attack me. So that was like clockwork. It went off every single time. And it was like the same scenario. And it happened scores of times. So I started using this to creep up on them, because if they realized what I was doing, they would start acting up immediately and start getting so loud the patient couldn't hear anything I was saying. They just start screaming. So I had to kind of creep up on them. And I would ask them, I said, are you hearing voices right now? And they said, well, no. So when's the last time you heard them? Well, about a half an hour ago. And I said, well, you're going to be hearing them in about 5 minutes, and they're going to be very loud. And this is what they're going to tell you. They're going to tell you, I'm crazy, I'm stupid, I'm a lunatic, don't listen to anything I say, get away from me, escape the ER, get out of the hospital. And if that doesn't work, they're going to tell you to attack me. And they said, well, I won't do that. But I said, I know you won't, but this is what they're going to say. And like clockwork, as soon as I brought up the energetic parasite stuff, bam, 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 right down the line. So here I was telling them what the voices were going to say before they said it. And what was so bizarre is they were so robotic in nature that they could not stop that progression. If somebody told you, hey, you're going to jump on your head and you're going to spin around 3 times in 5 minutes, you go, screw you, I'm not. That's bizarre. But these things could not stop that. They could not stop reacting. They could not stop that same progression. Wow. And I had a number of patients go, well, how do you know that? How did you know that? How did you know what they were going to say? And they'd ask me, are you crazy? Do you understand? Have you been there? I go, no, I'm not, but I've studied these things for years, and that's what they do. They are energetic parasites. They're sucking your life energy. They're keeping you from spiritually growing. They're destroying your life, and they're feeding off you.
It's interesting. You talk about how, that they don't like preachers.
They hate preachers.
One of the guys here in chat, my friend Jaguar, I think he's still here. Let me know if he's still here. But he had a close call of somebody close to him and his family, and I'm going to play this clip just so you can hear it. So his brother was walking outside of a bank in Sims, which is close to Mobile, Alabama, and I knew the preacher. There was a street preacher out there, and this is like the most meek, laid back street preacher ever. He doesn't even preach. He just kind of teaches Bible stories. He's out there open air preaching with a microphone, and he's telling you the story of Abraham. And so he's not like in your face. And so he walks out the store and he sees the street preacher, and then he sees this other guy come up and gets in his face. And so he gets in the face of the street preacher, and he's like cussing him out because he's like, filled with demons. And he starts tussling with him. He starts trying to fight the preacher. And so him and the preacher are tussling, and then the guy's mom was in the car. His mom gets out of the car with this long knife and goes up and stabs the preacher in the back. And there's a story right here. I'm gonna show this for you guys who are watching now. So I think Jaguar is still in chat with us. So I'm gonna play a little clip of this.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Bob Grip.
And I'm Lenise Lagan. Thank you for watching Fox 10 News at 9. We invite you to join the conversation on our Facebook page at Fox 10 News.
We're also streaming on Fox 10
Times.
Mobile County deputies say the two were helping a man who was preaching in the parking lot in Sims through his loudspeaker. They say the man was being attacked and then beaten with a gun.
Fox News reporter Andrew Perez spoke with the preacher. He joins us live in the studio with the details on this. Andrew.
Yeah, Bob, Lenise, Gene Duffy says tonight he's got 2 guardian angels. Authorities say the parking lot preacher was being harassed and threatened when 2 Good Samaritans ran to his rescue, both of them risking their lives to save his.
This is the answer for all the things going on in the world.
For more than 35 years, Gene Duffy says he's been preaching in parking lots across Mobile County.
On what God said he would do in his word, because what he said he would do is exactly what he will do.
But Wednesday afternoon, while preaching in the Sims Walmart parking lot, Duffy says mere words quickly escalated to violence.
I was preaching and the 2 people walked over, a fine young man, didn't have a shirt on, and an older woman, and they come over and he walked and put a gun to my head and said he was going to kill me, and she put a knife. She says, he don't do you, I will.
Authorities say 26-year-old Jesse Reed and 53-year-old Sandra Jerome threatened Duffy, ordering him to stop preaching. That's when deputies say 2 Good Samaritans who were inside a nearby New Horizons credit union ran out to help.
2 guys came in, they ran interference, and a couple of guys ran up to affront him.
Investigators say 36-year-old Kenneth Cushman and 22-year-old Stephen Stewart were stabbed 4 to 5 times each in the back. Deputies say the 2 suspects and a 16-year-old ran off and were later caught by patrol units along Moffett Road.
Within the last 2 or 3 hours, I had an assault made on my life, and I've been weeping over the people that did it.
Duffy says it was quite an experience, but still something he is used to. You've had it happen before?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Got everything from gun point.
Yeah, this guy was a sweet soul, man. He's no longer with us. He passed away last year, but so it wasn't him that got stabbed. It was the 2 individuals who came out to help, which was my friend Jaguar, his brother, and another individual. Both got stabbed as they were tussling with this old lady. And if you look at the mugshots of this lady, like something's going on. You can tell something's off. Definitely drugs for sure. But stabbed both of them, and he ended up. They have footage, I think, of him going to the hospital and visiting them in the hospital, thanking them and stuff like that for taking up. I remember when it happened. I told my friend here. I said, man, I think just because of that, they have a seat in heaven for taking up for God's preacher out there, for taking up for the man of God, and you know what I'm saying, jokingly, but just to see that. But Yeah, I used to street preach, and we'd have all kinds of people. And they'd come by us and tell us if we don't turn it off, they're going to kill us and fight us and all kinds of stuff. But demons are real, man. And they don't like preachers for sure. That was interesting. And there's so many of those, right? There's so many of those that go on. Also, this is something else I wanted to look up to and run by you, because we're talking about like how real this is. For a lot of people, it's always somebody else. It's always another family. It's always somebody else who's demon possessed, and they don't think it could be them or you know how real it is. But there's a couple of websites here. I wanted to pull these articles. CHOC, the Children's Health, talks about kids and suicide, right? Because one thing that comes along with the demonic possession is this fascination with suicide. But it says that these children are saying things like this. It says, there's voices that are telling them, I shouldn't be here. I wish I could disappear forever. I don't want to live here anymore. I want to kill myself. The voices tell me to kill myself. My parents won't even miss me. Talks about being a burden to others and having no reason to live, experiencing unbearable pain. I'm just going to submit this. What if that kid doesn't feel that way? What if that kid that's how the spirit feels? Nobody misses me. I don't want to be here anymore. Like, what if they're like projecting these ideas onto these unsuspecting children? Like, it's going on with teenagers, and it concerns me. I have a teenage daughter. There's even more. Here's one out of the UK, I believe, the Gazette Times. Kinkle is the guy's last name, claims voices told him to kill his parents and classmates. And these kids that are going on these school shootings and things, they talk about the voices. And one thing that's interesting is that most of them are on medication. Most of these kids that are doing these school shootings are on medication. Another article, the voices told me to kill my mother. Voices telling them to kill somebody. Another one, the voices told me to kill my mother. Chilling confession of a mad murderer in Costa Blancas. And one more, this one's interesting. Daily Mail, WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange is preparing to kill himself in prison after hearing voices in his head saying, "We're coming to get you." Psychiatrist tells after hearing. Julian Assange is talking about hearing these voices that are associated with taking your own life and suicide.
Well, they do have something out there called the voice of God, where they can transmit into the person's head thoughts.
Now, who is this and they? Is that the government?
Yes.
The government doing this?
The deep state, MK Ultra, can do that.
That's where that's where it gets weird too, because I have friends who feel like they're getting sent thoughts from vans outside of their homes and black helicopters. My experience is supernatural, in my, how you get over that supernatural, but they don't want to hear the supernatural stuff when they're saying, listen, it's not a demon doing it. It's a man outside my window sending me thoughts.
I know they have that technology, but a lot of times the demons themselves will say it's the government.
Exactly.
Or, that way they don't have to take personal responsibility for it.
They just deflect
so
it.
if there's nothing you can do about it because the government's doing this to you. It's not a problem with you. It's not something you can fix.
Exactly.
It's coming in from an outside source.
And so you can't tell them that, though, because they don't want to hear that, because it's a helicopter that's sending it.
Right.
It's a van.
But you're talking, I've seen young kids hearing voices. I mean, when I was working in the ER, beyond belief, and then here comes psychiatry, drugs, and it's right now 7.2 million kids are on psychiatric drugs in the U.S. 7.2 million. 622,700 of them are kids under the age of 5. 80,235 are on ADHD meds. That's basically amphetamine. 38,534 on antidepressants, 389,558 are on anti-anxiety drugs. So it's like, no, don't take responsibility for your own mental state. something's wrong with you internally, something's wrong with your chemistry. Take these drugs and feel better. So it's like they're being told you're not responsible for how you feel. You're not responsible for how you think. There's nothing you can do about it. Take these drugs. That's what we're going to offer you. So they're drugging all of society. I mean, look at the television. It's drug commercial after drug commercial after drug commercial after drug commercial. It's not like, hey, there's a spiritual solution to this. Hey, you're responsible for what you think. You're responsible for what you entertain. You're responsible for what you act on. No, you're not responsible. Take these drugs, it'll fix it. And they're making billions of dollars a year selling these toxic things. It's nuts. It's crazy what they're doing.
Yeah, it's a hard conversation to have, but we're definitely having it, and we're having to have it again. I've got a teenage daughter who's dealing with this stuff and coming of age and all of that and fitting in, and man, and I'm not the only one. I'm talking to a lot of dads, a lot of moms, people going through this. It's hard, and so I think the easy way is get them on this medicine. And I was talking to a friend this morning about the first time I seen Ritalin in action. My daughter was playing with her friend. We were at a hotel because we were out of town, and we had friends who were locally there, and they came over to visit us, and they brought their kid. And my daughter's playing with this little girl, and it was like 11 a.m. It's like, okay, time for your medicine. And they're just a normal kid. They're having fun. They're being rambunctious, and they're running around doing their stuff. It's okay, time for your medicine. They give her medicine, and she shut down like a robot. And she just sat on the couch staring at the wall. And I was like, what's wrong? What's wrong? Like she got in trouble and got put in timeout. When they gave her medicine, she and just went to staring. And it was like, oh, wow, that's how it works. And when I got to see that, like, I feel like even that's the easy way out. You have to work with these kids differently. They respond differently. Their genetic makeup may be a little bit different. You have to give them an outlet. They got all of this energy, and you don't feel like taking them to the park. You don't feel like, when we were kids, we got sent outside, and when we came back in, we was chilled out. And so these kids now aren't even going outside. So you got all of this energy in your living room. And so there's so much to be said, but I feel like the easy way out is the drugs or working through your problems, working through your anxiety. Listen, it's not just that easy pill or just this easy way out. We all mess up. We all have these feelings, and we all feel inadequate, but it's working through all of that stuff, right?
Well, it is, but there's a bigger picture too. Back in 1910, or prior to that, they had all kinds of therapies. They had Tesla's electric ray, they had naturopathy, electric therapy, all kinds of therapies. And they were all out there, and they were all doing their individual thing. And around 1910, the Carnegie Foundation and the Rockefeller Group sponsored what they called the infamous Flexner Report, which basically shut down any medical school that was teaching subjects outside of mainstream pharmacology. So it's basically, you either teach drug-related therapy or we're shutting you down.
Yeah.
So they weren't making enough money, I guess, selling drugs, and some of these other therapies were interfering with their profit margin. So they made it illegal. So that the edict was so powerful that only a few medical schools survived, like Johns Hopkins and McGill and a handful of others that were connected with these groups. The rest, all the medical schools were shut out. They could not practice medicine or teach medicine or have an accreditation to teach medicine unless they taught pharmaceutically oriented medicine. I mean, drugs are the answer to everything, because they don't make a profit off of these other things. So, doctors who practice any other kind of medicine beside pharmacology were shut down and threatened and lost their license. So these guys at that point basically took over the medical schools, and said the only answer to anything is these drugs that we're selling for a profit. And it's been that way ever since. Now you've got the drug industry that has one of the most powerful lobbies in the country. 2/3 of the Congress and 2/3 of the Senate have been bought off by these drug companies. And a majority of the people who make these psychiatric diagnoses are also under the influence of the drug companies.
Yeah.
You know, so these drug companies are.
It becomes an MLM.
Control.
Like they get money for, writing these prescriptions, right?
Yeah.
Like, what's the percentage of it? Because like I'm a little nervous. My daughter is actually supposed to go tomorrow to go talk to a therapist for the first time. Like, what are what's the percentage that they're gonna try to get her prescribed to something? If she has anxiety. She totally has anxiety. It's crazy anxiety. It really is. She'll freak out when she gets super anxious. She locks up. It's really weird. But like, what are the odds of them trying to put her on something? I'm kind of worried about this.
If it's a psychiatrist, it's probably pretty high, and most of those anti-anxiety drugs are addictive. Valium, Librax, Librium, those kind of things that calm you down, they're addictive. So
would they say that, like, if you were having like an anxiety attack, to take this, or to take this every day? Like, what is the most common practice with something like that with a teenager?
Well, if it's a psychiatrist, they're probably going to try to order some kind of drug. From what I've seen is there are some good private psychiatrists out there who spend time talking with the person and trying to work them through that.
Yeah.
But that's not what most of them do.
Yeah.
Most of them are drug pushers. Oh, you're having anxiety, we got a drug that'll fix it.
Yeah.
Here, take this, and it works. But the thing is that they become dependent on that. Your mind is like the more you use it, let me shut this thing down. The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
Yeah.
It's like a muscle. If you use it to cope, your coping skills will get better. What these drugs are like chemical casts, so you're not using your coping system to cope with these problems. You're using the drug.
Yeah.
So it's the first step toward, okay, if this works, when heroin works better.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd be very careful about that. And if they try to prescribe her anything. Now, there's certain things she can take. B vitamins will calm her down. Cheese, milk, and turkey have natural tryptophan. Now, they banned tryptophan for sale because the Chinese were producing tainted tryptophan. So they cut it out of the entire market. It's a natural thing that calms you down. Now they have melatonin, but it'll calm you down, but it's very, very subtle.
She takes melatonin for sleep, which I like to take it too from time to time.
Yeah, me too.
Good. Yeah.
But cheese, milk, and turkey have natural tryptophan, and after you eat a big turkey dinner, you go pass out somewhere.
Yeah.
But I'd be very careful about letting them put her on anything. Maybe get her involved with meditation or some kind of sports where she wears herself out.
Yeah, her sport. She's definitely in sport and she loves it, and it definitely helps for sure. But yeah, I mean, again, like teenagers coming of age, you're going to deal with stuff, right? So again, and having somebody to talk to is huge. I feel like, and especially when you're trying to talk to your friends, they're giving you bad advice. Like having somebody to talk to is big. And, obviously she has
find her a therapist that is not dishing out drugs.
Yeah.
Somebody who deals with adolescents.
You probably do reviews and stuff too, right? On these guys. You think that some of these people have reviews if we know where we're going and stuff?
Yeah, I'm sure. You probably can find information on them. But the best thing is word of mouth, really. To find a good one. And it's how she feels. If she doesn't like the person, find her another therapist. But be real careful about taking her to a psychiatrist. Because for the most part,
it's definitely
they dish out drugs.
Yes, therapy. But I mean, at the same time, I'm sure that some of them are still getting in on some of that money too. Got their hand in the cookie jar.
Yeah, mental health centers, they kind of work together. Where the psychiatrist dishes out the drugs, and they have individual therapists also working there. it's a good combination because the psychiatrists don't want to spend the time to, in most cases, to talk to the person individually, unless it's there are psychiatrists out there who do that in private practice, but in the mental health centers, in the hospitals, and psychiatrists are basically drug pushers. They push those pills.
Yep. Yeah, I'm reading some of the comments here. Man, we've done almost 3 hours, man, on your birthday.
Wow. Holy cow.
Yeah, 2 hours and 40 minutes so far. And I appreciate you hanging out with me. This has been really good. It's right up my alley, and really enjoyed it. And it's a conversation that needed to be had and needed to be had for me too. The interesting thing was, like, last night as I was going to bed, we I believe in synchronicities, right? God speaks through many different things and repetitions in your life. And so we were talking about my daughter going to see the therapist, and it has a bad stigma, right? Your kid's going, talk to a therapist, which there's other people I've listened to, like Charlemagne the God, who is he's a radio DJ. He's a black guy. He says the black community is suffering because they don't have therapists to talk to work through their thoughts. And so they go to drugs because they don't know how to articulate themselves or get it out. Then they go to drugs and they go to alcohol and these things because they don't know how to feel comfortable in their skin. So he brags about going to therapists. And so we're laying down, getting ready to go to sleep. And I got the TV on, and it's on The Nanny. Remember the show The Nanny with Fran Drescher? That's on. And the episode was about their daughter, a 6-year-old. She's talking to imaginary friends and stuff like that, and she's going to see her therapist. And some of the things that they were said they were like kind of concerned, but like, listen, her brain works a little bit differently. She just needs help working through some things and articulating things, versus like having a bad stigma that you're broken and you need medication to get fixed, So I believe in, all of this stuff kind of lines up, and even having this talk with you today just to go over some things with my wife about it tomorrow before she goes,
Yeah, be real careful before you allow them to drug her up. Sherry and I, my co-author, we get so many emails from the parents of schizophrenic kids and family members that have no idea what's going on, and neither does the schizophrenic themselves. So, a couple of years ago, we got together and we said, we have to put something out on this. We have to write a book for these people who don't understand what's happening to them and what's happening to their family members. It took us 2 years of quibbling and how are we going to do this where we don't scare people? How are we going to do this where we tell them the truth, that these things are entities, these voices are not hallucinations. And after 2 years of gnashing teeth and pounding this out, we wrote this book for those who don't understand what's going on. And it starts all the way with the history of psychiatry, how they operated, what they did in the past, the fact that the drugs do not cure anything. They're basically suppress psychotic symptoms. It goes into what the voices are, how they operate, and what you can do about it. And you can get that from our website at jerrymarzinsky.com. There's a lot more information we put on that website for people who are searching for answers and are not getting any satisfaction from psychiatry other than being drugged senseless. We've got a YouTube channel. There's a number of YouTubes on there. Sherry's got her own website where it's called keyholejourney.com. Go under paranormal. There's a number of videos on this topic. I have a YouTube site, which I've neglected. I've got to get going on it. But if you go to, I think you had all the information I sent you.
We'll have that in the show notes below for sure.
There's a massive amount of information we put out to help you understand what the voices are, how they operate, and what you can do about them, other than take drugs. Now, there are people who, like I said, will need to take drugs so they can work these programs. But we've put on our sites programs that interfere with the voices and weaken them. But once you get rid of them, you have to stay on a positive spiritual course and stay there. If you don't, they're going to throw you off, and these things are going to return, and they're going to return worse than before. You can't just that's why I wonder about exorcisms. They can get rid of them. I can get rid of them. A number of other people can get rid of them temporarily. But if you don't get on a positive spiritual course and stay there, they will come back, just like the Bible says, with more, and it'll be worse.
7
so
times
it's
stronger.
it's not like taking an antibiotic and killing, the bacteria. You take an antipsychotic drug, it just suppresses the symptoms. It doesn't cure anything. In the meantime, it's rotting out your nervous system. And they won't tell you that. They don't tell you the side effects. And if you start having side effects, they put you on other drugs that suppress those side effects. So these primary drugs can keep rotting out your nervous system. I mean, these are toxic drugs. These are powerful, toxic, tranquilizing drugs, and they have nasty side effects. This disease, this mental illness can be cured naturally. It's a spiritual cause. These people, psychiatry cannot comprehend any kind of illness that has no physical cause and no physical cure. It does not compute to them at all. They just can't relate to it. It's not even in their remotest part of their brain that these things are caused by spiritual forces that infest the body.
Yeah.
And you won't see any of that in any master's level of psychology or psychiatry. Nothing.
It was interesting that I knew, like, deep down when I was going through my episodes years ago, and it's probably because I had been a Christian a few years before that really helped, but I knew that if I was to go talk to a doctor, they could put me in a straitjacket, put me in a room and put me on medication, telling them the things. I'm being visited by spirits and hearing and seeing them tapping into my mind and pulling me in portals and stuff. Like, yeah, we got something for you for sure. And so we understand that the pharmaceutical companies are drugging and lulling to sleep our prophets and seers. Like, what if Jeremiah the prophet like went to the doctor, and you know what I'm saying? What if these people who are having visions and dreams and Mary and Joseph and these people who like went on to do amazing exploits, and the prophets of whatever religion you're a part of, like, what if they would have went somewhere? They would have drugged them and they would have shut off the communication. The thing about it, there is healthy communication. There are healthy voices. The voice of the Lord, right? Jesus said, "My sheep know my voice, and the stranger's voice they will not follow." Well, there's the voice of a stranger. You hear that voice, and it speaks through many different ways. Some hear it audibly, some hear it internally, some hear it as it's coming from themselves. But there are many other voices out there. So I'm glad that we did this podcast and really teaching people, encouraging them to look for the resources, get your book, teaching them how to follow the voice of the Lord, how to follow the voice of Jesus, the still small voice that speaks through the midst of that. I found it. I heard it. I needed it. I still need it today. Jerry, thanks for coming on the show, hanging out with me, man. Again, happy birthday. It means so much that you spent today with me. And thank you so much, man. We'll have to do it again for sure.
Yeah, you bet. Remember, not all voices, not all thoughts that you hear belong to you. People need to understand that. They need to watch their thoughts and evaluate those thoughts and decide which ones they're going to act on and which ones are not for their benefit.
Yeah.
The negative ones have a negative intention and want you to do negative stuff.
What is it? Think on these things in the Bible. One of my favorite scriptures, and I think it's so simple, but it works so well. Philippians 4:8. Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any praise, think on these things. If you want to know what's the demonic and everything we've been talking about are all the opposite of each one of those things that were mentioned. It is just take the word and flip it, and you'll find out that they're conspiracy theories, that they're self-hate, it is depression, it is anxiety, it is all of those things. And so if you need a good plumb line, get into scriptures. It really helps. Thanks so much, Jeremy.
Every negative thought that enters your mind about yourself or others does not come from you.
Good stuff. And the thing is, too, we're getting deep. People are picking up on other people's thoughts, other people's demons, the empathics. Like, other people got demons, and you get around them, and it starts to influence you. That's right. a whole nother episode. We'll do it, man. Thanks so much. Really enjoyed it. Right. We'll do it again.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Many blessings. Thank you.
All right, take care.
Jerry Marzinsky, ladies and gentlemen. Enjoyed it. Good stuff, man. We're getting deep. It's interesting. You know, you have a lot of Christians, again, will tell you that like every mental blockage, every defect is a demon. I don't think that they're all demons. I do think that some people's brain works differently. The ADHD things, like our parents cured it with a belt. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, they didn't put us on medication. It was I feel like you're getting lazy, man, for sure. You got to do the work. You got to show up, and we all need to be held responsible for our own mental state, depression, and listen, change your diet. There's all kind of stuff. I remember, man, when my in-laws heard Tom Cruise was talking about somebody. Who was it? One of the other, Heather Locklear, one of them, was talking about that if she changed her diet, that her depression would go away. Like her diet would cure her depression. And that's one thing that's interesting, that early on, we're talking about how do these things get a foothold? How do you get paired with a demon? How do you become good ground for a demon? And the schizophrenia and stuff. And one of the comments that I got from Allie said, your gut bacteria, making sure that you're taking care of your diet. Your diet is what? It's not your first brain. Well, some people say it is. They say it's your second brain. Your gut, it's your second brain, second brain. Whatever. It's your brain. It dictates the way that you feel. Go eat a bunch of McDonald's. And I'll tell you what, you'll find out, because McDonald's or any other food that's not good for you, while you're eating it, you're feeling great. Life and truth and longevity, all of this stuff is about delayed gratification. The flesh, the lower nature stuff is about instant gratification. What can I do right now to feel good? You can take a pill. Literally, you're not feeling well, you can take a pill right now. You feeling pain in your body, you can take a pill right now. There's so much you can do. You could take a pill. I mean, do drugs. Like, you're going to feel good, but you're going to pay for it. Alcohol, you know, overindulge in alcohol. You're going to feel great. You're going to be laughing. You're going to be opened up around people where you normally wouldn't be. But if you overdo it, tomorrow you got to pay. It's called a hangover. And you're going to be sluggish. There's times where we'll have some drinks and I'll drink too much and I feel it the next day. I say too much that I feel it, that it's in my system, that I got this poison in me. And the next day I'm just off. So my next day is screwed, especially if you got a hangover. If you got a hangover the next day that you can't shake, your day is screwed. At least it starts off screwed, the first half of it. So it's about delayed gratification. Do right now, do today what you want to prosper tomorrow. The instant gratification, the instant feeling good, the instant pills, the instant food, cheeseburger, slamming, all this stuff. Listen, make you a green smoothie. Put the things in it that they don't taste good. Listen, ginger doesn't taste good. Beets don't taste good. All of these things that our body needs, or we're fearfully and wonderfully made. There's things that it's fuel for our body. And if we put it in, your body will thank you. Tomorrow, the next day, you begin to have better health. You'll be able to, your mental clarity will be better because of your diet. All of these things linked into what you're eating that feels good for the moment. We can do a whole show on diet and the way that your mind works. Like a whole show on your diet and your spirituality. It's crazy. It's insane. So, but delayed gratification. Do it to where you're gonna be able to reap the benefits tomorrow. We want it now. Seed time and harvest. Put something in the ground, cover it up, water it, and then when are you gonna get the harvest from that seed that you planted? Depends on what kind of seed it was, but it's probably gonna be a couple months, couple weeks, couple years for some. Like huge trees in our yard and things, and they started off as a little seed that you had to cultivate. That you make sure that it gets sunlight. Delayed gratification. You stay away from anything instant. Listen, somebody was talking about pornography a while ago. Instant gratification, instant. But you need the delayed gratification. Instant friendships. You need delayed friendships. You need where you can benefit. You can have fun together. Where you can know each other. Like, it takes work to cultivate a good friendship. It takes work to cultivate like a good sexual life with your spouse. Like, You have to work up to it, right? Versus the pornography, instant gratification, boom. And you're getting messed up. And you can apply it to every area of your life. Longevity. Put in the work, man. Say yes, especially when it comes to, you know what I'm saying, your mental health. You got to take care of yourself. You know, you got to know yourself. Know yourself and you will be known. And I do, it comes down to it. I got a good friend of mine who was I don't know if he was an addict, you know, alcohol. But alcohol always opened the door. And him, but I know other people too, where he would drink alcohol, but it was never enough. Once you start drinking, now you got a buzz. Now you want pills. Now after that, you want to smoke crack. And I knew people, friends who would just, we can have a couple beers and kick it and watch a movie or whatever, go out to eat or whatever, or have a glass of wine. I do all that. But I had friends who I tried to do that with, and no, they trying to kill themselves. They're not drinking to have a good time. They're drinking to forget. They're drinking to suppress some things. So once you start drinking with them, like, hold on, man, why are you turning up like that? What's the deal? What you going through, man? Every time you can't have 2 beers. Know yourself. Learn. You find yourself keep doing the same things over and over. My good friend, he got into AA that really worked, and he really started going through the books and working the system, and it worked for him. He started to know himself. He started to tell himself that he can't go around. We'd invite him to go do karaoke with us. We'd go do Mexican and karaoke and stuff, and we'd invite him. He wouldn't come. You know, as a friend, you kind of like, come on, man, let's come hang out. He said, I can't do it, bro. They're gonna have alcohol there. I can't do it. I can't. I don't trust myself. Like if I have one, I might have one margarita with y'all, but when I go home, I'm screwed. Y'all go home and go watch a movie and go to bed. I go home. I need more. I might not come home tonight. I might go on a 3-day binge. The individual will go on 3-day binges. Sell their cell phone for $40 a crack, like all kind of stuff. Know yourself. So I applaud him that he found a way to know himself and not go to certain situations. Listen, I can't come hang out with y'all because y'all are going to be drinking. I can't be around it. And so I applaud him. Know yourself. Know what makes you tick. Know what sets you off. And avoid it. Avoid those situations. And when you can't avoid it, learn self-control. It goes a long way with everything that you do, not just this little stuff, but everything. With that, I'm going to say peace and shalom, man. Thank y'all for hanging out. We just did a 3-hour episode, and I haven't done one of them in a while. So much stuff coming, guys. I've been working my butt off on the back end. I got my Christian meditations up, Christian-meditations.com. If you want to get any of my meditations, they're there. We also have, my wife has been working on a daily devotional that is available too as well. So you can go to Christian-meditations.com, sign up for the daily devotional, get that delivered to your inbox every morning. Be a great way to start the day. And she put a lot of work into it, and it's turning out really good. So I've been working on a lot on the back end and infrastructures on how to set that stuff up. My courses are coming out. Finishing my courses, podcasting courses, opening up the podcasting network for other shows to come on. So much stuff. If you're interested in starting your own podcast and you're looking for a network and somebody to help you with this stuff, reach out to me. Hit me up on YouTube, Facebook, no matter where you are. Just hit me up and get with me. So we're about to open all that. I'm working on a podcasting course to kind of show people everything that I do on the back end so that they can get that course and do it themselves. Or you can hire me to do it for you. So I love to do this stuff. The aesthetic of those of you who are watching on the YouTube video and Facebook video, you see all the beautiful colors and all that kind of stuff. I love creating that stuff, and I get a lot of compliments, and people ask me all the time how to do it, and they want to hire me and stuff. Also did Kingdom Talks, the Christian talk show. I did their aesthetic and taught them how to work it, and now they're freaking blowing up, and they've got all this aesthetic and stuff, and they look really good doing it. Well, I taught them how to do it. I could teach you how to do it. You can hire me to do it, or I can just give you the course, sell you the course anyway. It's going to be coming out soon. So much stuff. Just make sure you go to my website. Everything that's like new is on the front page. Check it out. TruthSeekah.com. Again, thank you guys for all the support. Thank you for all the shares, all the love. Thank you guys for all the support via Patreon. All the names that are listed here on the bottom while you're watching, and everybody, the donations, the people who don't want there's people who don't want their names up here. So they just kind of support and things on the back end. So shout out to everybody. This doesn't exist without your help. Without you showing up, man, I'd have to be doing other things right now that I couldn't do this 3-hour talk with Jerry Marzinsky and talk about these really important subjects. And now we're going to be able to reach thousands of people with this episode and with this information, and believe that people are going to get free. And so thank you guys for being a part of that. It means the world. And I know that you guys see the value in it. Thank you so much. TruthSeekah out. We'll do it again very soon. Peace.
Your will so much higher than mine. So much higher than mine. So much deeper than mine. So much deeper than mine.
Well, that does it for this episode, folks. To hear more episodes of the TruthSeekah podcast, head over to TruthSeekah.com. And if you're wanting to support the show and get rewards, go to our Patreon page at patreon.com/TruthSeekah.